All right, there we go. So welcome everyone. We've had covered a lot of territory already, from black flies to aging. So I think we're ready to get going here. Sorry, just letting people in. There we go. All right. So I'm really glad you can join us today. We were just talking about your camera. If you want to turn it on, that's great. If you'd rather not, that's okay as well. We'll be doing some breakout groups, so it'll probably be definitely where you'd want to have your camera on for sure. Also, I'm going to ask that you introduce yourself in the chat. It's always nice to see where people are from. We have lots of folks from the Lochs region, Literacy Ontario Central South. We also have people from literacy programs across the province, and a number of our partners too, Employment Services, and I see there's lots from folks from Contact North as well. So it's great to see everyone. But please introduce yourself in the chat. We also, just as a little incentive, at the end of the workshop, we'll have a draw. So from the chat, and it's for a gift certificate, $25 gift certificate at Indigo. So the more times you post in the chat, the better your chances are of winning. So yes, please introduce yourself. And it's also nice to see where people are from. All right. So for those of you who I haven't met, I'm Carrie Wakeford with Literacy Ontario Central South, and I am here just, oops, sorry, I'm trying to admitted talk. I want to start by obviously welcoming everyone, and I'm just going to read a land acknowledgement as well. So we recognize that our work takes place on traditional Indigenous territories across the province. We acknowledge that there are 46 treaties and other agreements that cover the territory now called Ontario. We are thankful to be able to work and live in these territories. We are thankful to the First Nation, Inuit, and Métis people who have cared for these territories and who continue to contribute to the strength of Ontario and all communities across the province. We are honored to collaborate with Indigenous programs and partners throughout Ontario that serve Indigenous learners and serve Indigenous learners and clients. This includes our work here in Peterborough with the Peterborough Native Learning Program. All right, so now I would like to introduce our speaker today, ShawnCasemore. Shawn is a speaker, consultant, advisor, and author of 3 books. Shawn has traveled the globe working with organizations such as PepsiCo, Tim Hortons, and Bank Montreal. Shawn frequently delivers keynotes at large conferences and events, as well as company kickoffs and on topics related to influencing and selling in today's economy. We're really fortunate to have Shawn with us this morning, and he is about to take the fear and mystery out of marketing for all of us. So welcome, Shawn, and it's been great working with you up to this point, and I'm really excited about the day.
Yeah, thanks very much, Carrie, and good morning, everybody. First off, I want to make sure everybody can hear me okay. Everything's clear for everybody? Okay, we've got at least 1 thumbs up from Stephanie, so I'll take that from Chloe as well. So thank you. So, you know, in preparation for today, a couple things I just want to cover off briefly. So we're running until top of well, just before lunch, obviously, as you saw when you signed up. We'll end a few minutes early and turn it back over to Carrie for that draw, as well as just kind of some closing comments. But we'll probably take a quick breather around shortly after 10, give you probably 5-10 minutes to step away, get another cup of coffee, whatever you need to do. We'll keep that somewhat flexible, just depending on where we're at in the exercises. And today is really all about you. There's a lot of different breakouts that I've set up. Unfortunately, with the number of people here, I can't assign people to breakouts, but what I will do is constantly try and mix them up and let Zoom recalculate. So you're going to meet a lot of different people, hopefully some people that you don't know. And as Carrie said, the goal of today is really to try and remove or reduce any fear, mystery, concerns you have about marketing. We'll talk about exactly what that means, but let me say this, that as somebody who markets constantly, I can tell you that it brings a lot of value, and we'll talk more about that as we go. But you have to think about it like that old story of the tree that falls in the forest. The question is, if a tree falls in the forest, does anybody hear it? Well, yeah, the people that need to hear it. Meaning, if you've got a cottage close to that tree, you probably hear the thump when the tree hits the ground, maybe even hear the crackling as the tree starts to fall, and you're the person that needs to know. So we'll talk a little bit more about that. But again, my goal is to uncover any concerns, questions you have. So the other thing I'll mention is that as we go forth, if you have questions, feel free to place them in the chat. Now, I'm going to do my best to monitor chat as we go. If I happen to miss your question, feel free just to raise your hand or even to unmute and ask when I pause. My goal here is, again, we make this interactive. So if you have a question, make sure you stop me. Okay, so I've been watching the introductions. It seems like we have a wide variety of people. For those of you in Northern Ontario, I did the drive to Sudbury and back yesterday just to meet with a client. That was a solid 8 hours of driving. I live on Georgian Bay near Owen Sound, where I was born and raised. So I consider myself the near north rather than the far north. But it's great to see so many people. And I've worked in communities with clients around the Peterborough, Lindsay area. Spent most of my time obviously in Georgian Bay, but travel across Canada and the United States as well. So thanks everybody for being here. And what I'm going to do now is we'll just get the slides up, make sure that they work for everybody. So everybody can see those slides okay? Yep, perfect. So just quickly, if you're not as comfortable with Zoom, if you don't like where the slides are positioned or where the slides, how they're positioned on your screen, or when we get into discussion, because I am going to move out of the slides and bring everybody up here different times throughout the day, you can always go into the view options. You'll see it as a drop down near the top, and you can change up your view. You can also take, if there is a column of people and you want to move that, you can drag that up to the top of your screen as well, if that's something you'd like to do. Okay, so there's a little bit of logistics before we get started. So I thought something that would be good to begin with today is this image here. Now I know it's a little bit blurry, but I want to share something with you. So when I was about 14 years old, I had my first job at the local A&P store, which is now I think Metro, still actually in the local area though. And at that time, there were literally two types of Cheerios. There were regular Cheerios and there were Honey Nut Cheerios. And there were about 2 to 3 sizes of each, and typically 2. For the Honey Nut Cheerios, you had the small box and the mid-size box. For the regular Cheerios, you had a small, mid, and a family pack, okay? So essentially, you had 5 different boxes of Cheerios that you could choose from if Cheerios is something that you're interested in. Now, I worked the Friday midnight shift. Every Friday night, even throughout college, I would drive home, work from midnight to 8 a.m., stocking shelves, and the cereal aisle was one of my aisles. So what I want to share with you is that today there are 14 different flavors, essentially, of Cheerios, not including the different sizes. Now, not all of them come in big and small, but 14 different flavors of Cheerios. Now, let me ask you a question, rhetorical question, of course. When you think about the evolution, so we're talking when I was 14, that was a long time ago. Wow, that's a very long, that's almost 30 years ago, okay? So actually it's more than 30 years. It's a long time ago. So back then, what's really changed between 30 some years ago and today? Why so many different brands of Cheerios? And more importantly, how do people that have any interest in Cheerios at all make a selection from all these different options? Well, let me ask you, the last time you're in a grocery store, how often do you see somebody standing, pondering a decision, looking at the shelf? Typically, you might find one person in each aisle that's stopping, maybe reading a label to look at ingredients, maybe looking at price. But essentially, many people, at least that I know, especially if you have a young family, they're grabbing stuff off the shelf as quickly as they can because they have to get on to the next thing. There's not a lot of time spent assessing and viewing and trying to figure out. This assessment happens very quickly. So when it comes to the messages, the information that you have to share, I want you to think about it similar to these Cheerios, that it doesn't matter so much what you share, that the end consumer, and I don't mean consumers and retail consumer, but the consumer of your information, the person that is receiving that information, they will determine what's relevant and valuable to them so you don't have to worry so much about it. You see, I find a lot of the fear around marketing is trying to figure out, what do I share? To whom do I share it? And when is the best time to share this? How often should I share it? And I want to tell you that that's something you don't need to worry about. You see, the best marketers in the world know that it takes frequency in order to drive a message home. That's why when you see a commercial, it's repeated. Pepsi doesn't put up a single commercial, play it once, and that's the end of it. They'll play it over and over and over again, the same commercial. Why? Because as human beings, it's that repetition that drives our awareness. So as we go through today and we talk about this, we're going to dive into a lot of different areas and have some discussions. I just want you to remember this. If you take away nothing else from today, is that you don't need to think too much about what you're marketing. We'll give you some methods and tools and simple ways to do this, but you don't need to worry so much about that. Just start sharing the information, because it's the person on the other end that is viewing, seeing, or receiving that information. They'll determine if it's something that's helpful or not. So I don't want you to have that analysis paralysis and be overthinking what you're sharing. Just make sure you are sharing it. So again, we'll talk more about that, but let's jump into it here. So let me ask you a question for everybody here, and you can use the chat. So let me stop sharing. But before I stop sharing, here's the question I want you to answer for me in the chat. If you prefer to speak up, you can just raise your hand. But what myths exist about marketing from your perspective? And myths, I mean those sayings, those statements, those beliefs that seem to be out there about marketing. So what are those myths that you find exist in marketing today? So let me go over to the chat here. Again, if you want, you can raise your hand. Now my view, let me get everybody on gallery. There we go. All right. So what do we have? Marketing is expensive and you have to be an expert. You have to be a digital whiz. The more money you spend, the more effective it is. It costs a lot to do good marketing. You need to be really creative. You can't make mistakes. It's complicated. Okay. Anybody else? Any other myths about marketing that you find are out there? Needs to be flashy. Absolutely. Aesthetic are key. Yeah. Good point, Camilla. So let me just mention some of these. It takes a lot of time. When it comes to marketing, these myths that you're sharing can be true, right? I know people that struggle to create one piece of content, and that content can be anything. It could be writing a blog, it could be creating a flyer. They painstakingly, almost stress out over trying to come up with what to say, how to position it correctly, and they overthink the marketing. Also, in the idea of cost, right? Yes, you can spend a lot of money. You can go on and run Facebook ads, LinkedIn ads are crazy. Google ads have gone through the roof in price. If you've ever recently contacted a newspaper or some other form in order to advertise, it can be quite costly. But to your point, these are myths. It doesn't have to be this way. See, social media and really the advent of online marketing has really changed the game for marketing. Back when I was in my 20s, I first came back to this area. I needed a job. Unlike today's job market, there were no jobs, and you couldn't get a job in a small market like this unless you knew somebody. So there was actually a job put up in the newspaper for a car salesman. And I thought, well, that's interesting. I like cars. I like people. I could probably sell cars. So I went to the dealership and started they had a little training program. And to tell you how long ago this was, they had some DVDs that they actually had you play in order to train. That's how we trained back then. There was no streaming. So essentially, and I'm going to just mute. I think we have a couple people. There we go. So back then, right, training was much different. But anyways, I had the training. I get out in the parking lot, and the only way people came to that lot was either through a television ad, a newspaper ad, or referral. That was it. There was no online. There was no Facebook, no LinkedIn, none of that, right? So they would show up. I would try and sell them. Invariably, what I found is that the people I were working with at the time had been around about 10 plus years at that same dealership. And the rule was, if somebody comes to the dealership and asks for another salesperson, you don't get the opportunity. You have to pass them over. So almost every day I would meet somebody. They'd say, oh, is Dan here? Say, oh yeah, okay, hold on, let me get Dan. And nothing was happening. I wasn't making a sale, and my income was dependent on making a sale. Talk about being in a situation where you need to learn how to market quickly. So the dealer was doing marketing, but it wasn't helping me at all. So I decided, hey, I'm going to go home And I took, back then there was computers, there just was no internet. So I created a little bit of a flyer and I started driving around and dropping it off at people's mailboxes. And it was really just something similar to what was on my business card, that if they're looking for this brand of vehicle, this is where they could find me. This is my experience. It was just something I created, but I didn't do it out of the idea of informing other people. I really did it out of desperation. And that desperation came from the fact that A, I needed to make money, but I realized that in order to get the word out about me selling cars, I had to tell people. And not everybody was seeing the ad or reading the newspaper, right? And thinking about the brand that I was selling. So I had to get in front of them. I had to create some awareness. And I thought, well, I could just drop something off in their mail. And after about 2 months, people started showing up with the flyer in hand and asking for me. So marketing can be, despite the myths, it can be very simple. And you don't have to be that creative. I'm sure if I still had a copy of that, I wish I would have kept one, you'd find it almost embarrassing to look at, right? But it was simple and it was effective. So we're going to talk a lot more about that today, but I want to take these myths and squash them. And if you're holding back on marketing, you don't need to. And let me go further and say, what is marketing? So let me ask you that question from your perspective, thinking about your role and who you're trying to communicate with. What are some examples of marketing that you might do today? So just use the chat and drop in examples. And there's no wrong answers. I'm not going to call anybody out here, but what are some things that you could market today or share with those people that you're serving? So I'll just watch the chat and I have some ideas. So social media posts for courses and programs, workshops, absolutely. You could boost the promotion of a service, success stories, Twitter, obviously the services that you offer, social media ads for current training, absolutely. In-person tables in busy areas, yes. Good news stories, shout outs, new resources, website, posters, partner services, networking. The list goes on, e-newsletters. The answer is yes. Yes to all of it. And I think if you get comfortable sharing, and I'll throughout today, I'm going to refer to marketing as sharing because that's what it is, really. You're sharing information, right? But I want you to consider that there's so many things that you can do. It almost can be overwhelming. And sometimes the fear is, I don't know where to start. I don't know what the best method is. But again, don't worry so much about that. We'll talk more about how that really works and why you don't need to worry so much about it. But nonetheless, there's also classroom tours and Instagram reels. There's Facebook reels, right? So we'll talk more about these. Those are all great examples. And Carrie shared with me in preparation for today, and we'll talk a little bit later about some of the very common areas that you can use for your marketing and hopefully to drive a little bit of focus. Because if you are not marketing because you're not really sure where to begin or what method to use, I'm hopefully going to give you some ways to simplify that and to help you. Okay, so with that said, let me get back up to the slides. All right, so talked about the myths. So here's typically what we've been told about marketing. You've probably heard this even in some of the previous, I know many of you have attended previous trainings around marketing, and you've covered everything off from developing that marketing plan to different platforms and uses of those platforms. But let's talk about the common truths that we're typically told about marketing. We're told first off that it's having the right message, but the message must be relevant to the person who's receiving it. We're told that our timing is everything. We have to have the right timing in our message. So for example, to tell you about this workshop that happens today, next week, we kind of missed the boat, little late on timing. Or if we told you this morning about it, some of you might not have been able to adjust your schedules to participate, right? So timing is everything. And then value, that message must be helpful to the person reading it. Now, these are all true. You have to have the right message, right time, right value. But the determination or the measurement of these is not up to you. You see, think about if you've ever had a realtor mail to your home a little flyer talking about maybe a house they're selling in the area or their desire to sell your home. You see, those realtors aren't worried about whether or not you're selling your home right now. They just know that if they send out that message, they're going to get a hit. Somebody's going to be considering selling their home and reach back out. You see, it's the end user or the consumer or the person that receives the information that really identifies what's relevant and what's not. You don't need to worry about that. In the work that I do today, I do a lot of work with different teams and individuals around influence. Oftentimes that ties into sales teams, as you might imagine, but we do a lot of work around influence. What I always say is, don't worry so much about how to influence a specific person. Just be concerned with constantly practicing the methods around influence, because those will then in turn work for the people who are ready to be influenced. You know what I mean? It's a two-way street. And there's two parties involved, and we each have a responsibility. But if I don't practice influence, if I don't share information, nobody's ever going to get any information, and I'm not going to have any influence over them at all. Okay? So my role is to share that information. So here is the way in which typically the receiver, the person who's receiving our information, assesses information. And I'm going to give you an example. We'll walk through these, and then I'll give you an example. So it's really based on the relevance of the message, which you see on the left-hand side, and the value that message has for the person receiving it, which you see along the bottom. So if we look at the bottom left corner here, that is where the message relevance is low and the message value is low. Typically, we dismiss it. So you might think of this, a commercial that comes on. So I haven't drank beer since I was, I don't know, in my 20s. So if there's a commercial during the halftime, I want to say playoffs. That's not right. Super Bowl. If there's a commercial that comes on relative to consuming something, it's not relevant to me because I don't consume that. So I dismiss it. I ignore it. That's the point at which I get up off the couch and walk away. Somebody else might be sitting there and thinking, oh yeah, it's a good idea. I'm kind of thirsty. Let me go grab something, right? So if the message relevance is not high, if it's low and the message value is low, we tend to dismiss the information. Doesn't create burden, we just ignore it. Now, moving up on the left-hand side, if the message relevance is high to us, so it's a message that has some meaning to us, but the message value, it doesn't give us a lot of value, is low, then it tends to spark curiosity, but really, we really don't do much with it. So let me give you an example of that. Let's say, for example, that you're somebody who's in the market to buy a car, okay? And you've probably noticed that when you decide that you may purchase a car, suddenly you see those brands of cars everywhere, right? We were thinking about buying a Toyota Corolla about a year ago. Unfortunately, we couldn't get any locally. But at that time, we started realizing, wow, 1 in every 4 cars on the road seems to be a Toyota Corolla. Never noticed that before. So the relevance of those vehicles on the road was high, but the value, and in our case, the ability to actually want to go buy one and the availability of the vehicle was low, couldn't get one. So it sparked some curiosity, but wow, a lot of people are driving these cars. There must be something about them, but there wasn't a lot of value. We couldn't get a Toyota Corolla, so we ended up getting a different brand. So if relevance is high, but value is low, gets people thinking, but it doesn't really get them to act or do much with that information. Now, moving along the bottom, if the value increases, that's moving to the right, but the relevance of the message is still somewhat low, then we tend to ignore the message altogether, right? So, wow, this is interesting that there's a coupon to go to McDonald's. I don't eat there, and I simply ignore it altogether. So I don't dismiss it and maybe come back to it later. I just ignore it entirely. But this top right, that's really where the key is. When the message relevance is high and the message value is also high, that's when we generate interest, right? So let's use an example. Let me get these up here. Let me use an example of purchasing an electric vehicle. So does anybody here, show of hands, does anybody here have an electric vehicle today? I'm going to try and, I can't see everybody at once. So, okay, so don't see any hand. Oh, so Serena, she raised a hand. Okay. So at least one person has an electric vehicle. Okay. If you have a Tesla, don't take offense to this. I think they're a great car, but it's the best example I could give you. Okay. From my perspective anyways. So let's say for a moment, you're thinking about investing in an electric vehicle and Serena puts thumb down. And then you're thinking specifically about a Tesla. Okay. Now, if you think about going through this, if the message you receive relative to your thoughts around, I'm thinking about electric vehicle, it's time to trade, Tesla seems interesting, maybe you've seen one, maybe you've sat one, maybe a friend has one, and the message comes to you that the prices of a Tesla start at around $70,000. Now, let's say you're coming out of a Toyota Corolla, which starts around $20,000. You might dismiss the idea of a Tesla at that time because you say, wow, that is a lot more money, right? I'm not going to spend $50,000 in fuel over that period of time. And I want to help the environment, but I can only afford so much. So it doesn't really negate the idea of wanting an electric vehicle, but you might say, no, I'm going to dismiss the idea of a Tesla right now, but kind of keep this in mind that the electric vehicle is still where I want to go, right? So I dismiss the idea. Now, let's say the message I hear for the electric vehicle is that you can save on fuel. And I don't know about you, but fuel seemed to go up over the weekend by another 10 cents a liter. So save on fuel, that's relevant, right? Gets my attention. Oh, I can save on fuel with an electric vehicle. Fuel just went up. So it sparks some curiosity. But again, if it goes back and I say, well, jeepers, locally, nobody has any electric vehicles in stock, I can't get one for a period of time, I really don't do anything with the message. I'm curious. I'm like, oh, interesting. I think electric vehicles is the way to go, but I'm not going to take action. Okay. Now let's go continue this example along the right. Message relevance to the end user is low, but the value of the message is high. So maybe I get a message that says you can get 200 kilometers on a single tank of gas. Okay, interesting. 200 kilometers, that's not bad, right? But I can tell you for me, I just told you I went to Sudbury and back yesterday. My average trip is probably 300 kilometers minimum round trip if I'm driving my car. So that doesn't really work too well. So I'm going to have to ignore that message and probably go a different direction and say, you know what? And we have to say, electric vehicle really doesn't work for the driving that I do. Hybrid probably would. Okay. So I ignore, because there's some value there, but it's just not relevant to my situation. So I'm going to ignore the idea of an EV, and I'm probably going to start to look at a hybrid. But here is the key. Upper right, there's relevance to the message and there's value to the message. If I hear a message that, hey, with this new extended battery, there's 500 kilometers on a single charge, maybe trickle charge overnight in your garage, suddenly it's got my interest because I realize, hold on a second. Yeah, an EV, it's got the range I'm looking for. I can plug it in overnight, regardless of where I am, and it's going to be fully charged the next day to get that range. And I never drive more than 500 kilometers in a day. Suddenly, it generates my interest. So what I want you to take away from this is not all the different quadrants. I just want to help you realize that the end user, the person who's consuming our information, they're the ones that are assessing the information and making a determination. You don't need to overthink it. You can share it, and they're simply going to assess it by considering the relevance of your message at that point in time and the value it can provide them. Okay? So considering where we're at today, the key message here is I want you to consider that it's the end user that will filter this. So those who receive our marketing, they assess and filter the information based on the relevance and value to their current circumstances. All right. Now, before I go to this slide, let me ask another question here. So let me get this off. I'm going to stop share. So for everybody here, give me an example in chat of something that you're actually using today as part of your method to share information. So I'll say platform, but to expand on that a bit, how are you sharing information today? Are you sending out any newsletter? Are you sending out a mailer? Are you asking for referrals to others and actually reaching out and calling them? What are you doing? So LinkedIn, email blasts, newsletters, flyers, social media, Facebook ads. Okay, great. Now, of the stuff that you're sharing, same people, okay? Here's my question for you. What is working well? So of everything you shared, so if you said, I use social media, is there a platform that you can actually, I get great feedback or great interest from this platform, or are your paid ads working? Okay, so Teresa says Facebook. Shannon says no, nothing's really working as well as she would like. Facebook groups, Tracy's used, are working well. Emails, and sorry, I can't read all the names and such. Emails work the best from Wendy. Posters, flyers still work from Heather. Facebook and direct emails from Nancy. So what I want you to notice is this: if you're and Chloe says, I'm not getting responses. Okay, good. And Chloe, I appreciate you sharing that. So here's the key to this. If you go back to the idea that the people that are consuming the information, right, they're assessing relevance and value, you have to ask yourself, well, what is the best format or form in which I can share this information? And the only way to really know that, in all honesty, is to try a bunch of them. Right? That's the honest truth. I don't want you to walk away from today and say, well, look, Facebook is the way to go. Because maybe some people are getting results on Facebook and you might not. Who knows? But you won't know until you try. I can tell you as an example. So I've been very active for years on Twitter, on LinkedIn, on Facebook. I also have a business Facebook page. I've got a blog. I've got YouTube channel, and on the list goes. But what I've decided moving into last year, and I continue in this year, is that LinkedIn and YouTube and my website are the three primary tools I'm using for marketing. I do other things. I publish articles once in a while. I'm writing books, but it's really from an activity standpoint, LinkedIn and YouTube and my blog are the primary ways that I'm marketing. And it's because as I started trying all these, after a while, I realized, well, I'm putting time and energy into Twitter, but I'm not getting anything from it. Nobody ever reaches out on Twitter and DMs me. Nobody ever reaches out to say, I saw your stuff on Twitter. I wanted to reach out. It's never happened. So I've kind of done a test over a period of time and then decided, well, based on people have reached out to me, and here's something you want to ask, okay? If somebody reaches out based on your program or based on information you're sharing, and you've never talked to them before, first thing you want to ask after you say, hello, how are you? Nice to meet you, is, hey, question, where did you hear about us or me or our program? If you incorporate that as part of your initial script, you start to identify where should you focus your time. So if they say, oh, I received an email, it's okay, interesting. I've had 3 people in the last month tell me email. Am I putting enough energy into my emails, right? So that's how I determined that LinkedIn and YouTube and my blog were the way to go, because I just started asking people, how did you hear about me? I said, LinkedIn. Oh, I read your blog. Oh, I saw your video on YouTube. And I realized after a period of time that there's only so much time available in the day. So for me to put any energy, time, or even investment into Twitter, as an example, doesn't make sense. So you'll see about 2 weeks ago, stop Twitter, stopped it cold. I'm going to let it sit there. It's not costing anything, but I'm not investing in the blue dot, and I'm not investing more time. Now, I could be wrong. Maybe Twitter will be evolved through Elon and it'll be the best thing since sliced bread. I don't know. But right now I've determined I'm not getting leads from it. And I've confirmed that simply by asking that question. So why spend time there? So I would encourage you, and I realize you've got different people here with different information to share, and sometimes maybe even different, I call them audiences, but I mean the people who are consuming your information. What I want you to consider is that if you're not trying anything, start trying something, right? But most importantly, when you are trying some different platforms or ways to share information, make sure you simply ask, hey, where did you hear about us or me or the program? That'll start to identify where to put your time. If everybody's calling you saying, oh, I saw a newspaper ad, well, then where should you put your time and money, right? Definitely newspaper ads, because they're working, right? I saw Janet says, good relationships with partner organization referrals. Absolutely. But those partner organizations are the ones then you're marketing to, so that they know about the good work you're doing, so that in turn they can share it and refer people to you, right? So your audience might be the end user. Again, it's going to depend on where you're, what services you're offering and to whom, but don't just think about the end consumer of the service. Think about other organizations that are also in front of your consumers, right? Your end users that could refer them to you. That's a great point. So thanks for that, Janet. Margaret says word of mouth is still a huge way to get your message across. Absolutely. Especially if you're in a smaller community, getting out there, meeting people and talking about the value that you're doing. There were some earlier messages around sharing stories, testimonials. Those are all great ways to do this. You see, people are influenced by what they see other people doing. So it's one thing, for example, for me to tell you, hey, I can help you do X, Y, Z. But if I share a testimonial with you, in fact, I think I have one. It's probably buried, so I won't try digging it up here, but a gentleman mailed me a letter after I spoke at an event that was just a glowing testimonial on letterhead about how great this was. I never asked him for it. So now, and it's kind of embarrassing, I don't have it handy, but nonetheless, I have it handy, somewhat buried, because I use it with people. I say, hey, you're asking what it's like to work with me. Here's an example somebody shared with me. So testimonial stories, it's always better to get it from somebody else. And that's something you can solicit. When I'm done working with a client, when I'm done here today with you, and Carrie and I are wrapping up and kind of debriefing, if Carrie says, yeah, that was good, I'm going to say, because I've kind of groomed myself to say this, Carrie, that's great. Let me ask you a question. Would you be willing to provide a brief testimonial about working with me, right? Now, she might say no, or she might ignore that question. I don't know. But essentially, I don't get an answer unless I ask. And typically people are going to say, yeah, absolutely. Mental note, though, just something to remember. If you ask for a testimonial, write it for the other person. I'm going to say that again because it's counterintuitive. If you ask for a testimonial from somebody and they agree, give them a sample of what it might look like. So for example, you might reach out and say, hey, Carrie, thanks so much for agreeing to provide a testimonial. Here's an example, but feel free to rewrite, revise, whatever you want to do with it. Because people are so busy that they have the best of intention to give you a testimonial, they'll never get to it. So if you simply ask and they say yes, send them a simple little example, because you'll find 9 times out of 10, they'll say, yeah, that's great. Or I changed one word on it. And now you have your testimonial. And you can use that. I mean, you can use it in your website. You can use it on flyers. You can use it in brochures. You can share it with people, send it to them directly. You can add it in your newsletter. You can put it on the bottom of your email news or your email signature, right? Look at the value this person received from our program. So think about marketing. Again, I want you to think about marketing from the perspective of there's lots of options, but as you start to market, you want to hone in on or filter down to what's really working well. And then you can double down on that and gain more awareness and more traction. And it does not have to be ads. I run one ad in my entire business, and that is on Amazon for one of my latest books. And that's really intended to get some sales because I have a commitment to the publisher to make sales. Then when you write a book, they actually put the onus on you to sell the book, go figure. So I have to sell a certain number of copies. So I run ads in order to do that. That's it. I don't have ads. I don't invest in ads. Somebody contacts me and says, hey, do you want to run an ad in our newspaper or magazine? I say, look, I'll write an article for you. I'm not going to charge for that, but no, I'm not going to pay for an ad. I never have, because you can go broke pretty quick. Now, you might be in a different situation because you might have budget assigned for ads, and that's great. But I'm going to tell you from experience, you don't need to use a budget. You don't need to use money. It just takes a little bit of time, right? Okay, so let's go back here. There's a exercise coming up. So I just want to share. So Tracy says, our experience is that face-to-face is powerful. Excited about our new beach balls arriving next week. We anticipate doing some random summer location visits. So Tracy, tell us about, do you want to unmute? Tell us about the beach balls, because maybe this is something that somebody else.
Sure. And actually, it was a grant. If you, and I'll tell everybody this, I just discovered it. I was kind of like, it's new, and I'm like, it's mine. I'm not going to tell anybody yet until I get the grant, but it's for imprint, the number 4 and imprint .ca, and it's called 1 by 1 is the name of the grant. I think you can see it on their website. I saw it on I think on their magazine or whatever, but it can be anything that you want. It's, if you get approved, it's $500 in kind. And so it could be USBs or, or however you want to honor your volunteers or whatever. But for me, I was like, I really want some beach balls, because how fun would that be, right? Like, we had a lot of success the couple summers ago. We did pop-up little free libraries, which were simply just little bins that we like left around the community by the beaches and the dog parks and stuff. And people kind of went wild about them. And it was really a good way of testing the water for the appetite for little free libraries, which have now doubled in our community last year, mostly because of the chumming the waters with the pop-ups. So anyway, the idea is just like, literacy tends to be very stigmatized. I think everybody here would agree that it's sometimes really hard. And so it's just a nice, warm, fuzzy way of doing it. And ours are clear with confetti in the inside. How fun. So anyway, I'm excited about that. Yes.
Yeah.
And so everybody great. Apply for imprint grants.
Is it for imprint.ca then?
Yes. Yeah.
For imprint. So number 4, imprint, imprint.ca. I think I've seen the website before. So
yeah. Yeah,
great.
We actually did, here's another thing from like a marketing perspective. There's like pop-up screens, the retractable signs that you take out to a lot of the trade shows. One of the things that when I came in, we had this, we still have it. We have a gigantic rocking chair, and my predecessor was on the right track as far as having something really big to draw attention at fairs. But this thing is a beast. And the thing that concerns me the most, and why I haven't really used it, is because it's a rocking chair. And I don't know about you guys, but if someone gave me a chance to be on a big rocking chair, I think the inner kid in me would just like go to town. And I feel like it's a bit of a liability. So we ended up buying from imprint. We got a feather flag, but ours are kind of more rectangular, and they're 10 feet tall. So they're kind of like the ones you see at the gas stations and the cannabis stores, like on the, but they're very lightweight and they're very, and it's worked well, but you just have to be mindful of the height. So just a little, that's why we came upon it for Imprint.
Great, great. And I think Amanda has added the link in the chat if anybody is interested. I think it's in there. So thank you for that, Amanda. Great. Well, thanks so much. So yeah, so to your point, it'll be interesting to see. And let me, before I say this, let me counter this with something. So my bias, and you've already heard this a bit, my bias is any marketing is great marketing. But when you market anything, you want to be, as we talked about, assessing what works. And the only reason for that is you can become completely overwhelmed with the task of marketing, you know, because you start building and you say, okay, I got to write a newsletter this week. And oh my gosh, it's time to get a blog up, and jeepers, I got to get those flyers ready. And it can become overwhelming and you can start to resent marketing. Trust me, I know. And so what you always want to be doing, so if you do the beach balls, which sounds awesome, you want to assess just by asking people, how did you hear about us? How did you hear about the program? And if you start to say, what was those beach balls? Right? That goes on the list. Hey, the beach balls work. Next year, I'm going to try this again. So as you test and try new things, always be asking the question and trying to figure out, did this really gain traction? Was it effective or not? If it was, that's something you can continue with. And that's the fun of, I find marketing fun. And you're talking about a guy that I came from an operational role initially to start doing what I do today. So marketing was not intuitive. Didn't think I was a creative person, and my 4th book comes out in August, and I'm starting my 5th. I actually realized over 15 years I enjoy writing and I enjoy creating content, right? So it can become something that you learn to enjoy if you give yourself the chance to do so, but always be assessing, what worked, so that you don't become so overwhelmed with the task of marketing. So great share. Appreciate that, Tracy. That's awesome. All right.
Shawn, just can I add one more thing?
Sure.
One thing that my early career was in marketing, and so I mean, it's still where my love lies, I think, in what I do day to day. But one of the things is that I think it's 7 impressions was the magic number. But much like your example, you really just want to be top of mind. Like you mentioned, the realtors, saying if you're looking to sell your house, sometimes it's just no one wants a fridge. You don't need a fridge right now because your fridge is working, but next week your fridge dies. And then you want to have that 7-time repetition to think of a company, so that you think of the appliance store that has been in your face all year, right? That sort of repetition. So anyway, that's my thinking around the beach ball, is just the awareness piece, and then, warming up our brand to the community.
Yeah, no, that's great.
But
and
good point about
to your example too, Tracy. That's why phone numbers, I know it's changed, but phone numbers are always 7 digits, because there's something to do with the rule of 7, that it takes 7 times for us to recognize, to remember things. And as I understand it, that's why initially phone numbers are all 7 digits, because it helped us remember. So, I think studies that, depending on who you Google and who you listen to, the key about repetition is it takes more touch point. Let's call them touch points, right? Receiving information. It takes more of those than it used to, right? 10, 15, 20 years ago, simply because we're, surrounded by information. I mean, pick up your phone, you're going to get emails that are marketing something to you, and you jump on Facebook and there's an ad. You go to Google and you search something, the first thing you see is an ad, right? We are bombarded. You go to mail and there's something in your mail, it's an ad. So we're bombarded by marketing. So it does take a lot of repetition. So use 7. I've read up to 18 in some cases. It really depends on what you're marketing. But the key is, don't necessarily try something once and give up on it. But if you're always asking the question, where do you hear about us? It will definitely help you narrow down where to invest your time. And to Carrie's point, it can feel like bothering people, but we need those 7 times to promote a program. Yeah, absolutely. I do a quarterly physical mailer, because I found that I walked into somebody's office one day. So I started mailing out, it's a Word doc, double-sided. Think about my flyer back selling cars. And I simply put a little article on one side, and the other side, it's got another little article, but then it's got my phone number. And if you need help here, a little bit of promotional stuff around the perimeter. And I started mailing that out about once every 3 months. I created it, mailed it, created a list to send it to. And after about, a year, 4 different times of mailing this, I thought, this is kind of a waste, right? I'm not hearing from anybody. Nobody's saying anything. And I had a meeting and I walked into somebody's office and there was my newsletter sitting on their desk. And I said, oh, interesting. Did you pull that out because I was coming? They said, oh, no, I actually go through it when I have time. Since that day, I've never stopped mailing that because that to me was proof that people are reading it. And over the years, I've had people say, yeah, no, I got your mailer. So, looking for that validation helps to determine where to best focus ourselves. But to Tracy's point, don't let that stop you from entering and trying something new. Right? Look at it as a funnel. In the top are new ideas that I'm entering in. I'm validating as they're going down the funnel by asking, hey, how'd you hear about us? And out the bottom are those things that I continue to do because I know they're working. They go back in the top of the funnel, if that makes sense. I'm a visual guy, so hopefully you're not too dizzy by me doing this. All right, so let's jump back into it. So this is, I wanted to share this with you to show you that you can start anywhere. So you see the date. This is just a screen print from my blog. This is, I think, the second blog I ever wrote. I launched my business in May, end of May 2010. This was a blog I wrote in November of 2010, obviously, or at least published it then. I might have taken a month to write it for all I remember. But you'll notice some spelling mistakes. But let me ask you a question. When you look at this, what are some of the problems you see that stand out for you anyways, and looking at this blog? Now I can't see everybody, unfortunately, because I'd have to stop share, but just if you want to unmute, we'll try this and see. I don't think everybody's going to unmute at once here. So if you have any comments, just unmute and share what's wrong with this piece of marketing material from your perspective.
It's tight. There's no white space and
Okay.
it's really tiny to read.
Tiny, okay.
Nothing
great.
stands out.
Too
Okay,
much
that's kind of
information all at once.
too much information, great. What else? Anybody else?
I'm tired just looking at it.
You guys are beating me up here. No, what else you have? Tell me. Okay, I see some chat coming in. Let me get over to chat here too.
Orthography.
So too many words, not visually interesting, no graphics, hard to read, not enough white space, no plain language, lots of text, lots of words, too long, too many words, looks boring. Okay, all right. So I am kind of depressed now. You've not helped me. But here's what I want to suggest to you. What is good about this blog? What's something you can say that's positive about this?
The short sentences to start each point.
Yep. So there's numbers that start each point, a little bit of a subtitle. The first thing that somebody says they see is my name. Carrie, it's done. There's something there. That's the key. Looks like a set of instructions to follow. It's organized. You see my name more than once. So I'm gonna side with Carrie, and this was not planned. What I told myself, this was, again, this might have been my second or third blog, but it's the first one posted on my website, and I've cleaned it up over the years. But essentially, the main thing here is it's done, right? This blog is still working for me today. How many years later? 13, 20? That's a long, 13 some years later, this blog's still working for me. And what I mean by that is it's a blog sitting on my website that contributes to SEO, which contributes to searchability. When people search sales, influence, those kind of things, this blog is helping to create that. Now, how do I know that? I am content marketing certified and I'm SEO certified. I don't talk a lot about that because although I got the certifications and I practice it in my own business, it wasn't something that I was passionate about, right? You got to follow what you're passionate. What I'm doing right now, I'm passionate about. Sitting and writing all the time and assessing SEO, it just wasn't for me, but I understand it. And this is doing work for me. And the key is it's done, it's out there. So it goes back to what I said before. If I can put this out in the public domain and I get quite a bit of traffic to my website and I'm not changing this, I'm not revising it, I'm not going to do anything differently with what I'm just going to let it be. If it's okay with me, then it tells you can start with anything, right? As long as you get it done, because once it's done, it's out there, it's putting it to work. Now, I'm going to suggest taking your tips that you shared. It's missing a title, right? And the title usually tells me what this is about or who it's for. There is no title. I agree. There's definitely not a lot of white space, a lot of words. Ideally, the different numbers. So the prove it, every day is your first day. Ideally, that would be bolded. And even if I want to create more white space after prove it, I could move rather than down to another line. So more white space, images, bolding, title, right? All of those things would help this stand out much more, but it's out there. That's the key. There's something there, and it's going to work for me every single day. Yeah, Carrie says robots like words. In the SEO world, absolutely. Robots look at words. The Google algorithm does its assessment, and it helps me show up when people are searching for me. Sherry says, I thought the title was no comment. No, unfortunately, Sherry, that means nobody is commenting on my blogs. Okay, so that's, I don't want to say that's embarrassing, but ultimately, right, I want to show you that I started wherever I could at the time. I didn't know how to write. I'd never done any writing. I had a website. People told me I need to write a blog. So I wrote a blog, not knowing anything about anything else. But it was a place to start, and it built my confidence to where I'm at today. If you're to go to my blog today, and I'm not going to call it up here, but if you go to ShawnCasemore.com, go to blog, you'll see those blogs are much different. There's images. I actually have somebody that took the same course as I did in SEO. Because I don't enjoy doing the SEO technical stuff, they go in and do the meta tags and all that stuff for me. But you'll see a much higher quality blog. But you got to start somewhere. And to me, this is interesting to see this and see where I'm at today. I'm like, holy cow, I've come a long way, right? And you can have that same experience. If you're somebody that appreciates the tangibility of creating something, right? Not saying you have to be that creative, but if you just appreciate being able to do something and look at the results later and see your progress, marketing is a great way to do that, because you can look back at marketing initiatives a year or 2 or 5 ago and say, well, that wasn't that great, right? But it's still out there working for me. And look at how much we've progressed, okay? So if I can do it, you can do it. So here's what I want to do. Here's our first breakout we're going to do. So what I'm going to do is this. If you have a piece of paper or you have a phone, just take a quick picture or take a note of the question, because when you go into breakout rooms, as you know, I can't show you the question. But here's our starting point. I want you to consider who has interest in the programs, the offerings, or just the value that you, or let's say your group, your organization can provide. So we're focusing on the who. That's all we're focusing on, okay? And I want you in your breakout groups to have a discussion about that. Now, again, I realize that you may be serving different groups, different audiences, as I mentioned before. That's okay. Just share a little bit about who it is you're serving and why you believe those are the groups to serve, okay? So everybody has that down. Who has interest in the programs, offerings, or value that you provide? And don't limit yourself here. There's no wrong answer, okay? We're just going to come back and talk a bit about that. So let me go. So I'm going to set up the breakout rooms. Carrie, approximately how many people do we think we have here? I've got 2 screens.
44.
44. Okay. Actually, yeah, if I look at participants, that would probably help, right? 44 participants. Okay. So I'm going to go with, I'm going to do 8 breakout rooms. Yeah, we'll say 8. That'll give us about what? 6 times 8 is 40. Yeah, somewhere around 5 to 6 people per breakout room. Okay. I'm going to put you in the breakout room. I'd highly recommend you turn your camera on so you can see the other person you're talking to. And again, you're just going to visit that question. Explain what it is that you do, the value of your programs, and who it is that would have interest in or find value in what it is that you share. Okay. And I'm going to give you, it's 9:54. I'll bring you back at 10 o'clock. You'll get a 60-second notice. So yeah, a 5 after 10, because there's quite a few people in each room. I'll give you till, that's about 10 minutes, okay, to go around the room and discuss this. What I want you to be noticing though is, do you gain any ideas from other people around the room as to who they're serving that might be something else, somebody else that you want to serve as well? Okay, I'm going to put you in the breakout rooms. You've got your questions, and I'll stay back here. So if you need something, you can just exit the room, come back to me, ask the question, and then you can jump back into your room, and I may float around the rooms a little bit too. Okay, so I'll start these. We'll have you back here. I'll call you back for 5 after 10. So you should see it comes up on your screen to join the breakout room. Just click that button and it will take you there. You can always tell who stepped away from their computer. say some observations were that you had during those group discussions? And specifically, did you get any ideas about new groups or people that you could market to or share information with, or anything that challenged your current perspectives were? So who wants to share? Raise your hand if you want, and we can get started. If you were all a group of marketers, it would be hard to convince you to put your hand down. Serena, you had your hand up. Go ahead.
Sure, I can break the ice and hopefully more people put their hand up. I found my biggest takeaway just speaking with different community partners was learning that partnerships are probably a great way to bring in new clientele by working with other services that people are already providing and finding ways to use their clientele and share the clientele to gain more clientele and actually help their clientele get better services. So making connections with different organizations and growing your network in your communities.
Yeah, it's a great observation. And there's the thing: if you're like, writing content, putting stuff out on the online or on social media is not my thing, okay, then who are other community partners, other groups that serve the same constituents, if I can use that term, right? The same people you're trying to market to. If you build relationships with them, then you can trade off and help one another, making introductions, sharing information. You don't have to do much more than just build those relationships. So great observation. Serena, I also appreciate you asking about SEO. I added to what Sherry mentioned, which is SEO is simply, it's a technical skill that you use to ensure that anything you put online is found by Google and Bing and all those search engines. There's a way to write content so that it actually bubbles up to the top versus gets lost. That's all that is. So appreciate you pointing that out. So Carrie, you had your hand up. Go ahead.
Yeah, there are so many great ideas in the group, so I don't want to steal from others who may want to share. I'm just going to jump in. Stephanie, I am going to share yours. Stephanie said, when you ask people how they heard about you, if they're not sure or there's some hesitation, is to provide a few examples. Yeah. Just to help people say, oh yeah, it was the flyer, or oh, I did hear from someone. So that was just a piece. But also we talked about with a lot of the work we do, we have multiple people we're trying to reach, all with slightly different voice, for example. So people who refer to us, people who need to access our programs and services. So it's about knowing who you're trying to reach with a particular message and where they might be at that time. Anyway, and around SEO, we did a workshop. There is a workshop for LBS on websites and social media, and I will share it out after with the video. So that'll help out too. Thanks.
Awesome. Yeah, I took the technical course, but you can do there's things you can do in SEO that are very simple that are helpful. So it doesn't have to be overly complex. So who else? Let's get one more person, and I'll tell you now, if you don't volunteer, I will volunteer you. And that's not as much fun for anybody. And I'm going to pick somebody who doesn't have their camera on. Oh, right. There you go. Oh, suddenly cameras start to pop on.
I can talk if that's
okay. Yeah, please.
I don't know that we were maybe not as strengths-based as some other groups, but sort of what came up in our group was more around how do you reach the people that we don't see at the door? Because there's so much stigma associated. And I think there was cross discussion around, even though I work in mental health, some of the folks are in literacy, but there's stigma associated to both of those access points and services. So we can ask all the people that are coming in, but who's not coming in is often more the bigger question, at least for me, is around how do we reach those that we don't even see in the door. And I think that kind of was, we did answer who we were serving, but it kind of led into the, how do we find the people we're not?
Yeah, good point. Good point. Appreciate that, Christine. The other thing to consider, and building on kind of what Christine said, kind of what Carrie said, is if you think about initially at least, the people that you are serving, the way I like to think about it when I'm creating any sort of marketing is trying to put myself in their shoes. And for most of you, you know these people. You've dealt with them, you've met them, you've got to know them a bit, you know what brought them in, you know maybe some of the challenges they're facing. And so you want to almost put yourself in their shoes when you're creating whatever it is you're creating, because that's going to ensure that the message lands for them. And another thing you can do is if you've got some different marketing materials out and you've got a captive audience, you've got somebody there that you're maybe spending a little bit of time with, take 5 minutes and say, may I ask you a quick question? We're actually using these 3 different ways, or we're considering these 3 different programs. Which one of these speaks to you? Right? Use the people that you're working with as a way to continue to vet the marketing that you're considering doing. Again, what you'll find is as you go, there's so many different options, it can become a little overwhelming. So by asking where people find you, that focuses your time. But for the new ideas, by floating them by or asking the people that you're serving, hey, which one of these really grabs your attention? It's a way to gain, obviously, the attention of more of those people, but it might also help you get people in the door that you're not getting in the door today, because they might be able to share with you, well, that doesn't mean much to me, but this does, right? So make sure you use the people you're serving. I don't mean use in a bad way, but use them to create insights around what's most relevant, right? Because they'll be more than happy to share. And it's a 5-minute conversation, very simple. Don't send an electronic survey about this. I think you want to have this as a dialogue. So if they share, that's good, that's not, you can say, okay, interesting. Why is this good? What draws your attention? Because sometimes you got to peel back that onion a bit. Leslie.
So our discussion really revolved around some of the things, some of the tools that are actually out there, but also the discussion revolved around the difference between the need and the interest, and the people who qualify and the people who don't. So quite often what agencies or programs will see are people who don't really have the need, but have an interest and wouldn't actually qualify to be learners in our agencies. So that's one of the issues that comes up all the time.
Yeah. So what do you do? So anybody else here or yourself, Leslie, when you're faced with that, what do you typically offer to those people? They come in and say, yeah, I have some interest. And say, unfortunately, you don't qualify for this program. What do you offer them in return?
Volunteer with our agency if you don't qualify.
There you go. Yeah, there's an option. Absolutely.
Yeah.
Anybody else, when faced with that situation, what do you in turn offer the person?
It depends on why they don't qualify. So
okay. Yeah.
For us, because we're college level, well, we're doing like ACE credits, which are college entrance, and some pre-courses. Sometimes learners don't have the skill level yet with us, so we'll refer to another agency that they'll be qualified for. And if they're qualified, like they have a higher level than we do, depending on what then we offer, then that doesn't really happen very often because we screen depending on what it is they're looking for from us. So if it's computer training, we have a different screening tool we may use. So I don't think I've ever had someone who didn't qualify on that basis. Sometimes if they don't qualify because they're not a permanent resident, they're not the right age group. So we refer to another agency that may be able to provide them support. So if they're not a permanent resident, we might refer them to the New Canadian Center. If they're not 18 like yet, we would refer them back to the school and see school system, or maybe to other agencies that may be willing to support them.
Yeah, great. Thank you very much. Shannon, you had your hand up.
Much the same as Lee has said. We do have funding from some other sources rather than just our ministry too. So we do sometimes provide service under the auspices of some of our other funding to folks who don't specifically match with our ministry funding. But yeah, it's knowing what's going on in your community and being able to refer appropriately is the main thing.
Yeah, absolutely. Thank you very much. Janet, get your hand up.
We also gauge how busy we are and who's not coming in the door. So if we can offer them the services like free, and although they don't qualify for our programs, we do have volunteers who can serve them still. And the ones who qualify might take priority, but we can very often fit in, and we often offer free, non-qualifying programs that bring people through the door to take, and so they can see what we have.
Yeah. Yeah, great. And I'm thinking, so thanks for that, Janet. I'm thinking just before we go for break, kind of something to consider. And I'm building on what Christine shared, because I think it's an important point. What about the people that we're not currently reaching? How do we reach them? Don't forget that the people that are approaching you, beyond assessing, hey, what worked, what got your attention, what brought you here, you can also ask, who do you know? Now, again, the worst case they might say is, I'm not comfortable sharing that, and that's fine. But you can always appeal to those people to say, if there are others that you know, and here's a different way of saying it, or if there are others that you know that might find value in similar kind of program, here's some information, or have them contact me. And if we can't help, I'm sure we can connect them with somebody who does. So you can essentially market in person to the person that has been brought to you based on your marketing, and that can sometimes help you reach others that just maybe aren't aware, right? So marketing to me is just something that it's sharing information, again, that is both relevant and valuable to people, and letting them assess, when is the right time? Is this the right message for me? Don't get too worried about creating that yourself. Just always be sharing, and you'll find you'll always have interest, and you'll always be drawing people to you. All right, so it is 10:16. Carrie, do you have something to say before we go for break?
Yeah, before we go for break, if people have things that they haven't shared with the group, feel free to put it in the chat. I will collect all those at the end and put together a list of ideas that people came up with. So pop it into the chat.
Great. I see Camilla shared something about the Project Read has a directory of programs, which are great. So, all right. So I don't want to take you away from your break. I know that's probably important. So it is 10:17. So let's take 10 minutes if that's okay. We'll start back at 10:27. Does that work for everybody? Okay, so 10 minutes. We'll see you then.
There we go.
All right. So give everybody maybe one more minute. I do like Janet shared a good comment in chat there as everybody was departing, offering free programs that get them through the door, including CVITP and one-off workshops. It's another great way. If you can do that, if you can run workshops, even virtual, right? You can simply put together virtual workshops, offer them up. And if it will allow you to generate interest, then great. Okay, all right. So it is 27 minutes after the hour. I presume we have everybody back. We have fewer people with their camera on, which probably means some people are still coming back. But nonetheless, we'll continue on with the slides back up here. So I thought whoops, let me get this into the proper view for you. There we go. So I thought I would share this quote. So David Packard, if you recognize the name, was co-founder of Hewlett Packard. So fairly successful company. But one of the things I like that David said was that marketing is too important to be left to the marketing department. And his philosophy was that everybody needs to be marketing. And, that's really something that we're talking about here today. That as much as, I think everybody here is in a little bit of a different state. Some of you are probably generating all of your own marketing. Others have the advantage of having a budget to spend on ads. Others have maybe even the advantage of having a person in marketing that can help. So we're in a little bit of a different situation, but at the end of the day, you're going to find some of the most effective marketing is the marketing that you do, the marketing that you provide. Why? Because you're most closely connected with the program. One of the things I find oftentimes when I'm working with an organization is their marketing team is sometimes disconnected from the reality of what happens day to day because they're not actually serving their members, their clients, their customers, right, or the constituents that they're supporting. So they're sometimes a little bit disjointed. So the advantage you have is you're the one talking to them. You're the one that understands what's going on. You can ask and solicit information. And then in turn, that's information you can use for marketing, which ensures your marketing is most helpful and most valuable. Okay. So our first point, we've kind of gone through talking about the value versus relevance. So here's the next thing I want you to consider, that if value is a filter through which marketing information that we share is assessed by the end consumer or user of the information, then we need to be creative about how we provide that value. And that's where the creativity really comes in. Somebody said earlier, marketing requires a little bit of creativity. And for some, that can be a little bit of well, it's a myth ultimately, but it can be a little bit overwhelming for some people. Like, oh my gosh, I have to come up with an idea here. I don't know where to begin. I don't know what to say, how to say it. So we're going to talk about that. And what I wanted to share with you is something I developed just as a way to try and help people think about value. Because when we say the word value, it has a different meaning to different people. If I was to ask you to define value, you might have a slightly different definition than somebody else. So I broke value down into 5 different areas, not to say that you have to cover off each area, but the goal of this is just to help you think about value on multiple different levels, which in turn allows you to be creative and generate ideas, right? That's really the end goal here. So I'll walk through these levels, what they mean, and then I'm going to have you do something with this. So the first level is informative value. So any information that you can share that simplifies somebody's life. Now I said here simplifies their research, but to go back to, I keep calling it Christine, I'm not meaning to Christine, but to go back to what Christine said, there are people searching for our help. Typically they're searching online or through information that they see or receive, right? Or and that receiving could even be hearing about a program. So if we can give information that simplifies the research, it tells them how we can help, what programs might be available to them or that they might be able to participate in, how to best reach us, who to speak to, how long does this take? Is there any cost associated? Is it fun? All of this information is stuff that helps the people that we're serving, helps them simplifying their research into whether this is something that would help them or not. Okay, so you can think about value from an information standpoint. Information we provide can be of value. It can help people. You can also think about it from a fundamental standpoint. Value is fundamental. So let's say for a moment that I'm seeking something. Let's go back to that idea of that EV, the electric vehicle. If I was looking around for vehicles that were electric, I would have some basic expectations of what that car would achieve. For example, a basic expectation would be I can plug it into my house. I don't need to buy separately a fancy charger. Now, maybe a special charger comes with the car that I can plug in, but I shouldn't have to go out and go to Canadian Tire and buy something like that to serve my purpose. So there's some fundamental things I expect. So another way to think about the value you offer is what are the basic needs of people, the fundamental needs they have in seeking our program? Maybe it's to gain a job. Maybe it's to entry into college or some sort of different school. Maybe it's to progress themselves in their career, right? There could be all sorts of reasons. So never worry too much about being, too complex or thinking about value from a complex level. What are the fundamental things we need to offer? And some of the best marketers, if you look at good marketing, it's pretty basic stuff a lot of times. The message is repeated, but marketing is first and foremost simple to understand. Any marketing that somebody has to kind of scratch their head and go, what exactly does that mean? It's not helpful marketing, because as human beings, I don't want to say we're lazy, but there's so much information around us, we tend to filter pretty quickly. And we tune into those things that are relevant, obviously, as we mentioned before, and that satisfy our basic expectations. That's what fundamental value is. So you can think about at a simple level, who do we serve and how can we help? That's fundamental value. Unique value, what sets apart what you offer versus somebody else? So this might be a partner program, or maybe something you want them to do instead of doing something else. Okay. So as an example, you might say, well, some people, and I'm making this up, so its relevance to you may or may not be make sense, but some people can actually enter into college if they gain our support. If they work with us, we can help them get into college by meeting basic literacy standards, right? So you may say, well, that's not really unique. Well, it is when you consider the number of people that don't pursue the program and don't go to college and therefore are stuck on maybe a lower income job for their career, right? If they can get into college, maybe that's going to help them get a better job and ultimately have a better life, support their family, et cetera, right? So what sets us apart from other options that people can pursue? That's another way to think about value. And keep in mind, these are all individual. This isn't a checklist. It doesn't have to be informative and fundamental and unique. These are just different ways to think about what it is that you offer that's of value. Could be monetary value. Let's be honest, if you're able to provide funding, if your program is entirely funded and can help somebody get a better job, get a better career, right? There's a return on, I call it ROT, return on their time investment, right? So that's another way to think about value. If you invest in if you participate in our program, it can support you with a better life, better career, better income. Again, it's going to be different for everybody here. I'm just giving you examples. And then individual value. This is where a message that you share might grab somebody's attention based on what's happening. Go back to that idea of a Toyota Corolla, right? For us, suddenly we realized about every fourth car on the road is a Toyota Corolla, but a day prior, before we'd even decided that, we didn't really notice any Toyota Corollas. Why? Because at that moment in time, there was some individual needs that we had that we were really attuned to. So when you think about adding value and sharing marketing in a way that is valuable to others, the whole idea of this pyramid, again, is not to create stages that you need to progress through. It's to help you generate different ideas. Because again, if it's about being creative, sometimes we get stuck in saying, well, how many times or how many different ways can I say that we have a program that you might be able to join? But when you start to think about it in this manner, from a varying level of value, it can actually drive new and creative ideas. One other thing I would suggest is if you're stuck on how can I best portray this, talk to somebody that's within your network, get their feedback, right? Sometimes creativity comes when we start to interact with others, which helps us generate new ideas. Okay. And I did mention to Carrie, I'm going to share these slides with Carrie after, so you'll have a copy of these if you want to refer to them at any point. So here's our next breakout session. Here's what I want you to discuss. Again, realizing that everybody might have you might have people in your group that are with different programs, different organizations, but I just want you to share different ways that you believe, discuss different ways that you can share the value of your programs or the support that you offer. And think back to this value pyramid. Is there information that you can share? What's the fundamental aspects that those users of your program might find appealing if you could, share that with them? What's unique about your program? What sets it apart from other options that end users or consumers of your information might have? How do you support a return on somebody's time? More than money, you might say, well, our program is funded, but I'm going to suggest that people today, in many cases, value their time as much or more than money, right? Because time, it's so hard to get, right? We're all so pressed for time. And then individual value. What is it that satisfies unique or individual needs that the people that participate in our program would appreciate? Okay, so considering that, and again, if you want to take a quick note, take a snapshot of the screen, please go ahead. I'll give you just a moment to do that now. And then I'm going to randomly put you into breakout groups. I'm assuming they'll be different from last time. Yeah.
The questions on the different slide.
Yes, I wanted to make sure you have this as a reference point.
Okay.
And then I'll go back to that. Yeah, no problem. No problem. So there's the question. What are the different ways that you can share the value of your programs or of the support that you offer? That's the question I'd like you to discuss in your group. Refer back to that pyramid, right? Might give you some new ideas. All right, and I'm going to move you. So let me just stop share. I'm going to move you into breakout rooms. I'm going to recreate them. So that should mix it up a bit here. Recreate the rooms. Okay, so I think you'll be in a room with somebody else differently. I don't know. It's going to be a surprise to all of us, but I think going to be some different rooms. And it's 10:37. I'm going to give you to 10:47. I'm going to give you 10 minutes because we've got on average 4 to 5 people per room. Actually, I'm going to go with there. Now we've got about 5 people per room. Okay, so it'll be 10 minutes. Just take a couple minutes each to walk through. Okay, and at 10:48, I'll have you back here. All right. I have to say, as we get started, just because I've noticed a couple times, not to embarrass anybody, but Teresa Phillips has used a great marketing technique by including with alternatives with her name. One of the things I suggest to people, if you're on Zoom or you're doing a virtual meeting, make sure next to your name you put your organization or something about you, even a domain, right? Because again, simple marketing strategy, right? People are going to see your name, go, what's with alternatives? What does that mean? So not to call you out, I saw your eyes, but just I think it's a great strategy. We have to think about marketing not as big initiatives necessarily. Sometimes they are, but other times it's just simple things, right? That we, again, your email signature, what does it say, right? Your Zoom login. So great example. Okay, So I visited a few of you during the discussions, and it sounded like there were some good discussions happening. So my question goes back to you then, based on your conversations, what were some different ideas you had from those discussions on ways that you can share, or said differently, what is the value ideas that you have relative to the programs or services that you offer? So it looks like Leslie said the commercial that promotes NFLD uses a personal name as contact and more information. Yeah, absolutely. Anytime you can personalize, right, it creates a connection between you and the other person. So who wants to share something that you came away with from that conversation? And not everybody at once. I know you all want a chance to speak. I get it. All right, Tracy. And then Shannon.
So I'm just speaking because, you know, there were some great ideas and I'm the scribe. Janet mentioned the importance of saying free, including that everything is free, because that's a really great hook. She said, show up at events. When you're invited, show up. She said, really make sure that you're talking to groups in person, see if they have a newsletter article, to spin what you do. And we talked about how some of the service clubs like the Kiwanis and the Rotary for sure have one of their key focuses is literacy, one of their mandates, but also it's the International Year of Literacy for the Lions as well. So, you know, getting into the service clubs and talking about our services. And then Robin said, make sure that you speak their language, talk about, remind them of the services that are offered beyond what they came for. So that somebody may have come through the door to do one particular thing and then talk about, you know, we also do this and that, you know, that's another way to serve them. And then we also, and I didn't write down her name. She's with Abia. She's in my group. Oh, Jacqueline, who markets heavily to employers. We talked about trying to make inroads through industry associations, the Workforce Board, the Chambers of Commerce. And one of our group members said, you know, show them the value is money, all the time savings. And one thing I was just going to say, and we got punted out of our group was, oftentimes, at least in the Sarnia Chamber of Commerce, you can actually sponsor, you know, you can have swag on the table, or, you know, you can sponsor certain events. That might be a really great way if you can shell out for a marketing budget to be the sponsor of an event where you could actually be the highlight of the evening. You could talk about your services. You could have, you know, your rack cards on the table. That would be my suggestion. And I'm sure she's already doing wonderful things like that, but yeah.
Great. Thanks, Tracy. Appreciate it. Shannon.
We had a lot of chatting about how a lot of the value of what we do isn't really what we advertise, because we advertise programs because that's what people understand. But the value of what we do is once they get in the door and they recognize that we can support them with this and that and the other thing and connect them with these people and with these people over there. And so Nalita used this phrase, which I think is fantastic, that we're a foundation for opportunity. That just gives me goosebumps. So thank you for that, Nalita. I love it. So yeah, that's really the challenge is getting people to understand what we do. And it's something that I've, for myself over the last 20 years, have struggled with, because we go in and we say, well, we can do this and we can do this and we can do this when we speak to other community agencies. And they're like, oh, that's great. But then they have no idea what we do. So it's really frustrating.
Well, so let's explore that, because there's a couple ideas from both what Shannon, what you shared, what Tracy shared, that I just want to throw out there. And simple little things, you can feel free to ignore them. But if you have partners and they have newsletters, what's from stopping you from writing a little article or putting your logo, or just talk to the partner and say, hey, can we do a trade-off? Let me share X with you for your newsletter and you can do the same for me. It's a good way to cross-contaminate and get some free marketing and help one another. So there's a simple idea. I think your observation from your group, Shannon, about outcomes is important. And I think, again, Christine's going to roll her eyes, but to go back to her point about how do we reach the people that just don't know about us, the people that know the programs, recognize the programs, they know about us. They've heard about us. Somebody's maybe mentioned it, or they've read something in the past that helped them understand what's the program about. But it goes back to what I said before. You always want to put yourself in the shoes of the person you're trying to reach. What's important to them? What's going to catch their attention? One of my recent talks I started delivering was how to sell in a down economy. And it's going like gangbusters. People are reaching out saying, we need that. Where did I get that idea? I talked to a couple senior executives, business owners, and I said, so what are some of the challenges you're facing? They said, how do we sell in the down economy? Like, it's been so busy the last couple of years, we could sell without having any salespeople. And now nobody's buying anything. And I thought, okay, well, I have some ideas on that. So I started writing about that. You'd find it on LinkedIn, all these things about selling it down economy. Where did I get that idea? From the people that I'm serving, right? So that if you use their language, and so even if you've got program A and you're going to talk about program A, you could start with language or a phrase or a sentence that is based on a challenge they're experiencing. Are you struggling with X? Have you found Y? Then you lead into your program or the service that you offer. Sherry, I think you had your hand up first.
Now you can hear me.
Yeah.
We had a couple other ones. One that I thought was interesting was to continually reintroduce yourself, like on a regular basis, because the people you reached before aren't the people who are looking now. Possibly you can, or they might have forgotten. There's also infographics, so different ways of presenting information for people who might have a few more challenges. It's a very quick way to absorb information. And Tip Tuesdays, and where's the other? How-to videos. So a kind of thing that recurs that people can go and enjoy checking out. Fun facts kind of deal.
Yeah. Okay. And you raise a good point, which is, as everybody here knows, people prefer to consume information in different ways. So I said earlier, I'm a visual guy. So you give me an infographic, give me a video, I'm all in. You give me a long written document, I kind of skim it. That's me. You've got your preferences. So when we're putting information out there, we tend to go with our preference. So if we like written material, we're going to write a blog, write a newsletter, but you always have to think, well, or we do something, maybe writing isn't a good example, but you know what I mean? We always tend to focus on what we prefer and how we prefer to share that content. What you've really got to think about is, how can I create this, take this idea, take this program, take this concept and share it in different formats so that I'm connecting with different people? Because a video might get this person's attention, whereas a mailer might get that person's attention versus something else might get somebody else's attention. So great example. Carrie, I think you had your hand up next.
Yeah, I just, one of the things that I did last year, surveyed our partners and said, what do you want to know about us? And what's the best way of reaching you with the information? So that was really helpful. But what I've learned today, and Shawn, you mentioned this, and I think it's just really eye-opening for me, is to ask people what they're struggling with, or ask people what they need, and then the marketing is based around that. And I think, how many times have we tried to develop marketing materials and never ask a learner for input? Would this appeal to you? Would this catch your eye? The people, would you refer? Anyway, so thank you for that. That was great.
Yeah, that's good. And Nancy, I think your hand was up next.
I think Carrie just took what I was going to say. We were talking about tapping into the lived experience of learners, and what would they say to promote your programs. And I'm sorry, I forgot your name, but they actually have a lived experience panel that they vet all their stuff through. And which I thought was really cool, and also to ask participants of your program at the end say, would you run this again? Did you find this useful enough to for us to offer to other people? And or what would you do differently? So to really lean on those who you are trying to market to give you feedback. And you know, again, as Carrie said, use their language, use their perspective in the marketing.
Yeah, no, that's great. Great observation. And I think just something Tracy put into chat, and I think it's a great idea as well. I use it. If you've never used Canva, CANVA.com, I think it is the easiest tool you can use for any sort of marketing. They give you templates for presentations, for mailers, cards, you name it, they've got it. You can start there, you can create from scratch. I've even found, for example, when I'm putting slides together, sometimes they have better images. So I'll create a slide deck over there, and then you can just transfer it into PowerPoint if you want. So great resource, and you can start for free. You don't have to have a paid, and I think I do have the paid version, and it's like $150 a year. Like, we're not talking a lot of money here. So Christine, I've called you out enough that you've probably got something to say now.
I wasn't rolling my eyes either. But even
okay, good.
So it's all good.
It was a good point. It's a good point that you raised.
And I just wanted to echo what it was me, Nancy, that we were chatting about the lived experience piece, because I was saying, since we've had our lived experience panel since 2016, and I can't tell you how many times we've been so wrong with what we present to them. And I think it's so easy. Like, I recognize I come from a place of privilege. I'm working, I have a home. I think a lot of the folks, I always think about it, the best way I can relate is when someone in my house is on vacation and I still am going to work, how hard that is when they're enjoying their day and not. And then I think about most of the folks we're working with that are in living environments where there isn't anybody else that is going out and trying to engage in these upgrading moments or look for jobs, because too, even accessing that job and getting it isn't going to be significantly life-changing for folks immediately, because they're in such a impoverished place. So I think it's remembering, like, us putting that out there and saying upgrading, what does that actually mean for the person on the ground, and what holds the value for that? And we've done Bridges Out of Poverty training locally, a lot of the staff probably on the line, and what we've found is that folks that's most valuable for them that are sort of in that lower class is relationships. So if we're marketing attainment of getting things, we're missing what's most important to those folks. So I think that's where I just could talk about lived experience forever, because we have it so embedded in our work, but I think it's so important because we're not the people that know, even though we do the work and we see the value that comes, but what is their value in what they're coming in for? Because it's hard to take that step to do this stuff.
Yeah, agreed. Great point.
Can I just jump in, Christine? Because you said something really important in our breakout room, and it was if you run a program or whatever it is, if it doesn't work, you don't continue to market it, because it's the same as selling a product. And I just wanted to make that point, because if it's not working, we need to change something.
Yeah, I was sort of giving the comparison of, like, if Apple puts out a product and no consumer buys it, that product's gone. They don't push it out again and sort of blame the customer. But I think that is our nature, is like, this is what we know, this is what we're funded to do. So we're just going to keep putting that out there, even though what's coming back at us is all telling us it's not what they want. So we've put in that practice of, we ask at the end of everything we run if people would want us to do it again. And if they say no, we don't offer it again. We change it. We ask how to improve it. And it's sort of taking in that business philosophy, because you don't see things get restocked on a shelf that never sell. Like, they don't keep holding that product. They just stop.
Yep. And two things that you brought up that I'll share. So I think your idea, Christine, is something anybody here could do, which is create your own informal, I'll say advisory panel, but panel doesn't have to be 12 people. An advisory panel can be 2 people that have maybe participated in a program. You've got to know them a little bit. You're comfortable with them. They're comfortable with you. And or they'll tell it to you straight. Sometimes that's the most important piece. And you just say to them, whether you reach out or at the end of a program, say, look, periodically, I'm trying to come up with a new way of sharing this program. And it sounds like you've got value. Would you be okay if I just reached out and you give me some feedback? So you can do that informally, or you can do it more formally and have a meeting and bring a panel in, or meet virtually and say, we want to share with you some different assets. What do you think? Assets being off what you call the things you create in marketing. Asset could be a blog, it could be an ad, it could be a social media post. The other thing I wanted to mention was that you can think about the same message. Sometimes we need to hear it in different ways in order to be effective. If you have children, sometimes that you'll tell them, stop it, right? Don't do that. But sometimes you have to change the tone of your voice. Sometimes you have to, change where, maybe saying it from over at the kitchen window. Maybe you actually need to walk over to where they're sitting, right? So sometimes the same message, in order to have an impact on somebody, needs to be changed up. You need to change the delivery of that message to get somebody's attention. So it's another reason why you can sometimes take a message that isn't working, and if you think it still has legs, just try a different format. Maybe you move it from written to video, or video to a more of a, we were talking about those images you can create, right? Kind of the cartoony looking images. A cartoon's not a good description. But different ways to share the same message to see if that helps. Sometimes it will, sometimes it won't, right? But change up your messaging. That's how you're going to get the attention of different people. Okay. A couple of people have said they have to leave early. That does not give everybody a right to leave early. A couple have messaged me directly. If you have to go, I completely understand, but please stay. Otherwise, Carrie's going to look at me and say, Shawn, everybody left. Something's wrong. Okay, let's continue on. Let me get these back up. And right, here we go. So here's, we talked about this earlier, but ultimately I hope you see from some of the conversations that you've just had that some of the best marketing doesn't have to cost anything. It really doesn't. Now, can you invest in marketing? Absolutely. Can that have a great impact? Sure. And if you've got a budget, why wouldn't you use it? But it doesn't have to cost anything. If you don't have a budget, or you're concerned that, well, we just don't have the money to run ads, hopefully from some of these conversations today, you're realizing, oh, that's not really necessary. There are other ways to get this message out. So these were some of the different ways that Carrie and I spoke of, and some of these have come up in our discussions today. I actually went in and made a few adjustments here in the last break. So I just wanted to put these back out there, not to say these are the only ways, but these are many of the common ways I think you've been using. So you can deliver presentations. Those presentations, keep in mind, if you ever do a presentation such as this, maybe you run a virtual event, if you record it, now that has legs, meaning you can use that over and over and over again. See, the other part of marketing that you want to consider is the time and effort you put into creating that marketing asset, that thing, that presentation, that video, that post, right? The more you can use that on an ongoing basis, especially if it's relevant, the better, because it saves you time. Let's be honest, if you come away from today with 32 ideas, the next challenge you're going to have is, how do I implement 32 ideas? I'm already pretty busy, right? So I've given you that funnel idea to ensure that whatever you're focusing your time and attention on is appealing and attractive to the people that you're trying to attract. But here's some very common ways, obviously, presentations, which you can record and share. Networking, we've talked a lot about that. You've got to be out and about in the community in order to connect with people and build awareness and build relationships that can help you share messages. There's different print media, there's social media. We've talked about, many of you are using even social media ads in some cases. And I think depending on the demographic, I don't want to go into this because this could be a rabbit hole, but one thing I will note about social media is there's so many platforms. I think the key to determining which platform is, again, looking at your preferred end consumer. And if you can narrow down their demographic, their age, that sometimes will point you in the direction. Meaning, if they're 16, I probably wouldn't start on Facebook, right? I might go to Snapchat, for example, or Instagram. I mean, there's even studies out there that show the different age groups and their preferred platforms. So if you're going to use social media, you might be on Facebook and then realize, oh goodness, that's because I'm on Facebook. But the people I'm pursuing, if they're much younger, maybe I shouldn't be on Facebook. So something to consider there. Blogs, which can take the form of different things. I'll take a blog. Here's an example of how you can make multiple marketing assets out of one thing and save yourself time. If you look at some of my latest blogs, you'll see in the middle of it is a video. Of that blog, I create the video only. Then the person that I told you helps me with my blog uses a service called Temi. I think it's temi.ca, I believe it is. I'll check that before we go here. It's just a service. Actually, let me confirm that before I go any further, because I don't want to mislead you, because we are recording this. Temi.com, and Temi.com is transcriptions. So what happens with Temi is I can take a YouTube video and record it, put it up on YouTube. Then I can copy that YouTube link, put it into Temi, or I can just upload the recording, whichever I prefer, and it will transcribe it. That transcription, then the lady that helps me, Barbara, she then takes that and simply puts in some spaces and stuff, right? Create some white space, move some things around a bit. She adds some images in, and then she posts it as a blog with the video in the middle of it. So that video, I didn't create more content. Now there's 2 assets. Then the young lady, Ruta, which helps me with social media, and I'm giving them shout outs here, they're great people. She, and let me get back to the slides here, this might make more sense. She then takes that blog and she grabs quotes out of that blog and simply puts them in images or with images, right? So now I've got images. So I took a video, I created a blog from it without additional work. She'll create multiple different social media images for LinkedIn, for Facebook, used to be for Twitter, obviously. Similar image, just different layout. Then that transcription is sent to another gentleman who turns that into a podcast, right? Then from the podcast, he can create, I can't remember the name of them, but they're those, you know, the podcasts where you get little tidbits and you see the little line. I can't remember what they're called, but anyway, so it's an image of my podcast, but it's little sound bites from the podcast. So we use those on social media. So I guess what I'm getting to is one asset, one marketing thing you create can turn into multiple different things. And I used to do all these things myself. Just as I got busier, I couldn't handle that. And I thought, why not get somebody to help me that can do it as quicker or better than I can? So think about it. Every time you create something, a newsletter, a blog, a pamphlet, a brochure, a presentation, ask yourself, what other forms of marketing could I turn this into? You know, if you record what we're doing today, this could easily be transcribed and split into multiple different blogs. You could create dozens of social media posts from this, all with a single recording of audio and or video, okay? So there's a way to start to be productive with the work that you're doing and not really create yourself more work. And to give you an example with Temi.com, to take a 10-minute YouTube video, I think it's $4 to transcribe it. And you upload the link, you hit go, and then you'll get an email saying it's done, and you simply download, I just take it, cut and paste that into a Word doc, and there's the beginning of a blog. So very easy, very cost effective. So we've got blogs, we've got referrals, we've talked about that. Build out your partner relationships. Really focus on partner relationships. How can we exchange information? We talked about newsletters. Do they want you to create a guest blog if they have a website and they accept external blogs? Can you share some social posts where you're both branding those posts to get in front of their audience, right? And help them do the same. This is a great way to gain referrals that is a little bit different from the kind of referrals we typically think about, which is, hey, introduce me to somebody, right? You can gain referrals through their marketing channels and vice versa, do the same for them. And of course, there's paid marketing. But I put paid marketing last because, again, I'm not a big proponent of paid marketing. I would rather create assets myself and share them because I think that's just a more cost-effective way to do it. You can spend, I did do a test several years ago on Facebook ads. I spent hundreds and hundreds and hundreds of dollars and I got goose egg from it. So the test was no more social media ads for me. It doesn't work for what I do. It does work for some, but not for what I do. Okay. So here's a question just for the group, and I'm not going to put you in a breakout, but just to ask you, which of these is everybody using today? We talked about this a little bit earlier, but I'm just curious of the ones that are listed here. Which are you using today? Just shout it out because I don't want to stop sharing the screen here. So just unmute and tell me what you're.
I use presentations, networking, and social media.
Okay, great. Have you ever recorded a presentation and then split it up into different types of social media posts?
No, that is new to me. But when you were talking about Temi, I found one the other day and I posted the link, otter.ai.
Yes.
And I had taken a video that was created by the organization and I transcribed it, and it was otter.ai was so incredible. There were so many different features. So that might be something that comes into my future.
Yeah. Yeah. Great. Thanks for sharing that. Anybody else?
I use everything but the blogs.
Okay. Great. Great. And again, what I want you to think about coming away from this is if there's areas you're not doing something in today, should you be? And maybe the answer is no, but it's something to consider. But then the next thing I want you to consider is how can I take something I create and get as much runway out of it as possible, right? How can I take one asset and make it 10 assets? It's not that hard to do. Okay, just going to check in chat here. So Google Ads, LLSC uses the Google Ad Grants. That's a great one because there are Google Ad Grants. And there's the Temi link. Thank you for that, Wendy. And Chloe put in the Otter.ai link. Okay, great. All right, so let's keep moving. Here is a formula. So I thought that there might be some of you still sitting here saying, okay, so I've got to create some assets. I know I can. What's a way that I can create this that it's effective? And we've talked about getting feedback from the people that you serve, right? Getting their input, getting their feedback. We talked about, kind of advisory boards. We've talked about just asking people, but here's kind of a formula that you can use if you're somebody that appreciates formulas. If not, that's fine. But here's something I call this the message impact formula. First, you think about who are we serving here? Who is this message intended for? Is another way to say this. Secondly, what value to them can we provide? So you notice so far we're really focused on an individual or a group of individuals. And then the last question, where do they spend their time? So what I'm breaking out here is kind of what we've talked about so far, but it's meant to serve you in this manner. First, you have to focus on who it is we're serving because you might be serving different markets, different types of people, or people that are in different circumstances. And as a result of that, your main message might be the same, the services that you offer, the value that it brings, but how you open it, how you position it might differ. Because all of us know here today, again, faced with so much information, what do we tend to do? We tend to filter stuff, we skim stuff. And if you read the first line, here's what I was taught when I was learning content marketing, which is how to write a blog in a way that supports SEO that we talked about earlier. Because when you write the blog, there's just certain rules, lots of white space, keywords, all this kind of stuff that some of you don't need to know about it, so don't worry too much about it. But what they teach you in the Write the Blog is the most important part of any blog is the headline, period. Because if people see the headline, which could also be the subject line on your email, right? Or the headline in your newsletter, or the headline on your ad, the top line on your ad, if they see that and it's not relevant to them in this time and place, they're not reading any further. You've lost them already. So the most important part to think about is the headline. The second most important part is the first line. The third most important part is the last line. Because what we tend to do is we read the headline, go, oh, sounds like me. Read the first line, maybe the first couple lines. Then we just skim down it, then we go to the end. If the beginning statement or phrase or sentence or paragraph is relevant, as is the last, we tend to go back up and now we read it. That's how people tend to consume information. Isn't that crazy? Headline, oh, that's relevant. First line, makes sense. Last line, yeah, now I'm going to read this. I'm going to invest my time in this. So in order to make sure you get those things in that order and make sure they're effective, it kind of comes back to thinking, well, who is it this message is meant to serve? Who is this marketing message meant to serve? What value can we provide? And where do they spend their time? The time will help you determine where in this marketing mix you might want to place it. Maybe it's in a multitude of places or formats. Maybe it's in one. So if they spend a lot of their time on, we said earlier, Facebook, then okay, I'm going to put this message on Facebook. But Facebook might have a link to our website. So can I take this asset and also make it a blog, right? So that if they get on Facebook and they skim it and they come to our blog and they find it there, they can read it in more detail there. So here's what I call the message impact formula. But when you're creating content, think about what I said relative to what gets people to actually read all of the content. Headline, first line, last line, then I read the content. And that's whether it's a 5-line single slide that you're sharing on social media, right? Then look at that top line. That's why, here's something crazy if you didn't know this. We could go really deep, but I don't want to lose everybody. If you notice some of the best social media ads, the font, that top line, there's red somewhere because red's been proven to get people's attention. Just like right now on chat, there's a little red number 2 that I see on my screen. Why? Because red gets your attention. So when I used to write social media posts, I used to put a little red dot or a little red stop sign or red quotes at the very top line. Why? Because red is meant to get people's attention. So when you go through your ads on maybe social media as an example, take a look at the ads that get your attention and notice the common traits between ads. Those are things you can use, right? So if you think about your headline, could you make it red font? That's going to get people's attention. So just something, again, kind of maybe a little bit deep for our conversation today, but just little tips and tricks that hopefully some of you anyways that enjoy this can use and apply. All right. Just want to double check, see some few new messages in here. Okay. All right. So here is a question then. Is generating awareness from our marketing, is that enough? Is that enough of a goal for us to want to invest the time and money and effort into marketing? I'm going to suggest, and again, I keep saying my bias, which is my belief is no. I used to have somebody in the early days, or early on, I got somebody to help me in social media because it can get quite busy. And I didn't know everything I thought I should know. So the person that I originally engaged really focuses on engagement. So they'd say, okay, we had X number of views and X number of likes. Okay, that's a measure, that's good. But if the phone wasn't ringing or I wasn't getting emails, that was my measure. So over the years, to me, awareness, which on social media as an example, or in a blog, or even on, if you send out flyers, right? It's nice to have people to be aware. That's good, because maybe they don't need us today. Maybe they need us tomorrow. And if they're aware of us, they know who to call. But the real measure of success is engagement. And engagement is where somebody is actually engaging with you and engaging with the content. So they're leaving a content on your blog, which you notice from my first blog they didn't do. They're calling you, they're sending you an email, they're walking up to you somewhere and having a conversation. That's engagement. That's really what we're going for. And again, I share that with you because the goal isn't to market like crazy. There's actually, I think, a book called that, Market Like Crazy. The goal is to create marketing that has impact and that creates engagement. Because when you gain engagement from marketing, then you can look and say, well, I invested time in doing this and I got something from it. Now, that isn't to say you shouldn't market unless you have engagement. We've always got to be using that funnel and trying new things. We've always got to be asking what brought people to us. That will validate what marketing is working. But really, the true measure is engagement. So when people respond, reply, comment, that is engagement. Okay, and telephone even better. Visiting our office even better than that. So the goal of any marketing is to generate engagement, and engagement can be measured both directly and indirectly. Here's what I mean by that. Direct engagement can be things like maybe a phone call, or they arrange a Zoom call with us, or they agree to a Zoom call. You'll notice on my signature, there's a link that says book a call with Shawn. That link goes to Calendly. I find that tricky to say for some reason, Calendly. Calendly, I've set up my Zoom link in there, and you can choose, I think it's a 15-minute or a 30-minute call with me. I just set them up in there, really easy to do. You pick the days and times, or it'll read your calendar and find a spot. And then in there, I put my Zoom link. So when they book, they and I get a notification it's booked, and the Zoom link is in both our calendars. So for me, it's hands off. Do a lot of people use that? No, but I would say once every 1 to 2 months, somebody will use it. Usually it's maybe somebody after a presentation like this that wants to speak to me, somebody I've ran into somewhere that wants to speak to me. And it's a very easy automated way to create some engagement. So that Zoom link, that Calendly link that drops in my calendar, that's direct engagement, because now they're wanting to speak with me. And obviously face-to-face. But some examples of indirect engagement are things like referrals, outreach, different comments maybe that somebody makes on something. Hopefully they're all positive, right? Yeah, and Tracy says that those are vanity metrics. Comments and shares are where the value lives. Absolutely. Likes, check marks, that kind of stuff. It's nice to have, but it doesn't tell you anything, right? So if you think about engagement as being your goal, here is my next, and this will be our last breakout session. So if you're getting tired of breakouts, you only got one more. If you're enjoying them, unfortunately, you only have one more. But here's the question for you to discuss. How do you measure engagement in the marketing that you do? So in any of the information you're sharing, how do you measure engagement? What tells you it's being successful? And I really want you to listen to what other people are using as their measures. That might help you. Okay, that might give you some other ideas, because the goal here is to, again, to be really clear on, we're going to market, we're going to get stuff out there, but we want to really make sure we're productive. We're doing this in a way that's most effective, but doesn't take a ton of our time, and therefore we're getting the engagement we desire. Okay, so there's the question, how do you measure engagement in your marketing? All right, and I'm going to set up the breakout rooms. I'm going to change them up one more time. Hopefully you're okay with that, but I think it's a good to meet different people. So, okay, I think we got a few more people coming back. Show of hands if you've met somebody today that you didn't really know before today. You can use a thumbs up if your camera's off. Okay, there's 1, 2, there's 3 people, 4, 5, 6. Okay, good. There's Leah with her, that was the kind of your thumb was like out there, eh? All right, no, that's good. I mean, the goal of this too, if you think about marketing from the standpoint of partners and people helping you, okay? You share a post somewhere, maybe on social media, and if you know somebody and they share it, suddenly it's exposed to their network too. So building relationships is part of marketing. If I take a look, my number one supporter on LinkedIn, meaning the person that likes and shares my posts the most, is a guy that is a coach on my oldest son's hockey team, and I've been assistant coach and trainer with him side by side for years. Nothing to do, never bought from me a day in his life. I don't even know if he knows exactly what I do for a living, but he's constantly liking and sharing things, and he's got a good network, right? So the more people you know, the more people can share your word, the better it is for you. And again, that costs nothing. So just based on that discussion, does anybody want to share some of the things that your group come up with? Robin, your hand was up first, so.
Yeah, I think we need more help is the message that we got. We're good at, using social media and checking to see what happened with those pieces, how many views we got, that sort of thing. We're good at asking people how did they hear about us, but we don't necessarily know what we're doing with that information. And we may not be asking the right questions because we asked who referred you, did somebody refer you, did you see an email, did you see an ad, but we don't ask them which ad or anything like that. So really, how do we do this better? That's kind of the question.
Yeah. Well, and I think you answered it to me, and I'm not trying to sound facetious at all. If you ask those questions, where'd you hear about us? I think it's just asking a more specific question. And the biggest challenge really would be, where do we capture that? Right? Because if I'm talking to you, Robin, and I ask you, where'd you hear about us? And you say, oh, I think I heard you in social media. Say, oh, interesting. Well, we're only on Facebook, so it's got to be Facebook, right? And you say, yeah, where do I put that so that other peers of mine know that, hey, we're getting some hits on Facebook. People are finding us, right? So you can capture that in an easy way in a Google Doc, right? Date, name, and platform or method that they heard about us. And you can share that. Or if you've got a CRM system, you can capture it there. I mean, to me, it's just keep it simple. A Google Doc, we can all share, we can populate. And then once a month, maybe in a team meeting, we sit down, we throw that down in front of us and say, okay, where are we getting the most hits? Where do we spend more time? So I hear you. I'm definitely not a marketing master by any shape of the imagination, but what I do know is I can ask questions that help me validate what is working. And then with that, if I use that, right, effectively, I've got better marketing. So good. It's a good observation. I think it starts with just asking better questions and then capturing that information somewhere that everybody on your team or that works with you can share. So it's good. Who else? Nobody else?
I'll jump in. I was in Robin's group, so very similar messaging, but it was actually eye-opening for me because we tend to measure everything, but we were saying we're not measuring this, all right? And so I think that's that it's been really eye-opening. It's been great that way. Yeah. And also for me, measurement is not to be tricked by what Google is telling you or what Facebook is telling you is, oh, wow, you had all these visitors to your website. No, not really. It was robots.
Yeah, that's true too. And to your point, I'll tell you something, and I am going to get to you, Wendy, in 2 seconds. I haven't missed that. So we have grown the traffic to my website immensely over the past 2 years. Like, I can't tell you numbers, but huge trend, right? If you go to my YouTube channel, I think you can probably even see the trends and the growth, right? That and about $1.55 will get me a ticket on the bus. AKA, it does nothing for me. Creates awareness, but the people that I'm trying to reach aren't necessarily the people coming to my website or going to YouTube. So one of the challenges I have today is, okay, so I'm doing marketing, I'm working these platforms. Is it reaching the right people? And in some cases, my website specifically, it's not. So then I'm trying to figure out, how do I get it to the right people? So for example, I'm reaching out to groups like the executive committee. It's tech, it's where CEOs meet in these groups and forums, and they have a chair and they talk. So I'm trying to get in to speak at more of those, because that's where I need to be marketing. That's the people I should be in front of, not necessarily writing a blog that gets people from all over the world to, visit my website. I mean, that, you know what I mean? I'm not trying to monetize my website. So always being clear in the measurement piece is important. Know where people are finding you, and you can easily figure that out. But then make sure that you're investing your time and energy in the places that are most relevant, right? That gets you the engagement you're looking for. Wendy, that was longer than I expected, so I'll stop. Go ahead.
Oh, thank you, Shawn. What I was going to say is that one of the things my organization is involved in right now is bringing experts in who can assess our social media. And we're, like a lot of us, we're kind of falling down on that with the way that we're utilizing it. So that's going to be an interesting exercise. The other thing I was going to say is, I think I've lost my train of thought now.
My fault.
Yeah, no, it was just leveraging what other people are doing. So for example, I'm on LinkedIn. I've had probably 3 or 4 organizations approach me and say, would you be interested in what we have to offer? And well, I've had more, but 3 or 4 of them have really been good. So being proactive on LinkedIn, I think is, apart from saying, do you want us to help you recruit people? It's a really great way to just be really proactive and target. You can see what somebody's all about and say, hey, would you be interested in learning more about our services too? Yeah. So that's something that we've leveraged.
Yeah, great. That's good. When you have somebody assess your social media, use what we discussed as your barometer, because many will come in and say, we fully assessed, and here's your views and here's your likes. And the question you can ask back is, okay, that's great. Thank you. How do you know if those views or likes are the people that I'm trying to attract? Number one, because they won't know that. The most you can see is an IP address, and that doesn't tell you anything. And more importantly, the big question is, here's the target audience or the targets of people I'm going after. How do I best reach them through social media, right? Because again, I always warn clients when they even work with an agency around social media, you got to focus on engagement, and you've got to get them to focus on how to help you, achieve engagement, which is measured by phone calls, inquiries, online chats, emails. That's the engagement you're looking for. So always kind of have your do that thing with your eyebrow. You're a little bit suspicious when they're talking to you, and you now have enough that you can ask some questions and they'll go, oh, they know what they're talking about. So I can't just talk about likes and views and get a big contract here. So maybe, Carrie, you want to cut that out of this recording. Okay, so let's continue on. We're running out of time, but let's just continue on a few more things I want to cover off here. So we've talked about engagement, and so in starting to loop back to where we began and the goal of today, because we have dove down into a bunch of stuff, right? And it's almost like peeling back the onion. We took the idea of marketing, we peeled it back to the fundamentals, who we're pursuing, being clear on that audience, if you will, using language and methods and approaches that are most relevant to them, that get their attention, and ultimately the measure of our success is through asking, gaining insights, and determining the level of engagement we're getting. And that kind of tells us, well, what's working. And always think of that funnel as far as new initiatives going in, but what's coming at the bottom based on our discussions, assessment, interviews, et cetera, is going to determine what we continue to focus on. So when we place our focus then on engagement as the desired outcome of our marketing, it can ultimately stress some people out, because they say, well, look, I'm doing a bunch of work here and I'm not getting the hits I expect. That doesn't mean stop. That doesn't mean, okay, I'm posting on LinkedIn every week and nobody's ever reached out to me. Wendy said she's getting people reaching out. Nobody's ever reached out. I'm posting 6 times a day. It's taking me an hour. I'm going to stop. Don't think of it that way. We still want to drive awareness, but your ultimate measure of the success of your marketing is the engagement you get. It's the people reaching out to you. And LinkedIn, for example, I want to share some inside things with you that hopefully be helpful. I've tried over the years to create a profile that is attractive, meaning, people use LinkedIn for search, right? They go to the search box and they type in, professional speakers or speakers on influence or marketing speaker, for example. And the question is, do I show up when they do that search? And the answer is no. So I did some of my own research to figure out, well, how do I make that happen? So it's as simple as saying, well, take the keywords, marketing speaker, speaker in marketing, based on our example here today, keynote speaker, professional speaker, and simply sprinkle that throughout your profile. Put it in your experience, put it in a little blurb at the top, right? The more you put it in, the more chance people will find you. It's as simple as that. So I did that and I got some improved results, but I actually found a guy that he does this stuff. He lives in the United States, Eric Z. Johnson, if you ever want to look him up. Really nice guy, but for like $250, he went through my profile top to bottom. He gave me 2 one-hour videos showing me a screenshot of every single thing I needed to change to get better results. I made those changes, didn't take long, and boom, I start getting inquiries through LinkedIn. So sometimes it's worth it. If you look for the right people that are experts, you can get very good insights. And because LinkedIn, YouTube, those are actually search engines. YouTube is the second most used search engine next to Google, meaning that people go to Google and type questions in, they also go to YouTube, okay? And I would say from a professional standpoint, people use LinkedIn in the same manner. So don't get stressed out about this. Just be aware that the way you assess the value of your time invested in marketing is engagement, it's response. And if you're not getting a response you expect, don't stop. Just take those marketing assets, take those things to the people you're trying to get the attention of and say, hey, question for you. Is this something that you would actually, have you seen this before? Number one. Number two, if you did, would you actually respond or do something with this? If not, what would make you want to respond? And here's a simple example of how you can do this. You can obviously ask people you're working with. You can reach out to past participants, but you could also go to an event and take something with you, an email newsletter, for example, or take a picture of a post and say, when people start to talk to you at your booth, if you're at a booth, you can say, question, we post a lot on Facebook. Here's an example. Have you ever seen this before? And they say yes or no, it really doesn't matter. You say, well, if you read this today, would it make you aware of the services we offer? If not, what would? So always be assessing, the value of what you're doing through the people that you're trying to engage with. And it's okay to carry this stuff with you to use as examples, right? Because you're not always going to be in front of them. But don't let it stress you out. And don't just stop because Shawn said, don't do things that don't drive engagement. I'm just saying you've got to be aware that engagement is your ultimate measure of success and use that as a gauge for where you invest your time. So I wanted to give you a very simple form. I realize you've done all sorts of workshops in marketing, and by no means is my intention here today to intimidate you or to give you other things to think about. The whole goal of today is to simplify this, make it easy, take the fear out of it, if you have any fear, okay? So here's a simple formula to consider again, and it kind of captures everything we've talked about so far. So you've got a message. Don't focus necessarily on what the message says, at least initially. Focus on who does this message benefit, right? We've talked about that today. Who am I trying to reach? The second piece then is the moment. How can I gain a moment of their time and attention? We've talked about headline, first line, last line. We've talked about using color. We've even talked about using Canva as a way to create different images that you can use in different ways. And then last but not least, what's the method? How can I best share this message? Now notice in there, I haven't told you to actually put the message in. It's obvious that you're going to have a message to share. And I come in with the belief that everybody here has a message to share. You know what the services are you're offering. I don't need to tell you that. What I want you to take from that message that you're sharing today is just add in these few pieces that will ensure it's a little more relevant. So who does this message benefit? How can I gain a moment of their time and attention in order to read this message or consume this information I'm sharing? And how can I best share this? Is it, go back to what we said before, can I make multiple assets out of this and share this in multiple ways? Is there a single channel this would be best suited for, such as a presentation? So it's a simple way to think about marketing, because marketing can be a complex topic. And I think today we've dove down into some different areas. And again, I hope I've given you some tips more than scared you away from marketing moving forward. Here's a couple of quick things I want to share with you. I'm not going to go through this in any length. However, if you're interested in marketing, if you're like, yeah, I'm really enjoying this and I'm looking for other ideas and how to market, this is a great book to have. I don't have it handy, but I do have it on my bookshelf downstairs. It's called Words That Sell by Richard Bayan. And this book walks through everything from single words to use that have an emotional impact to phrases you can use. So if you're stuck on different words, how do I make this a little more appealing to get people's attention? He gives you great ways to do that. Some examples are, instead of saying this is a new program, you could say this is an unheard of program or a never before seen program. Instead of saying, I'm just trying to pick those that are I can use an examples here. Instead of saying stop, so you need to stop worrying about the cost, our program is free, you could say, quit worrying so much about cost. Our programs are available to anybody at no cost, right? So he just gives you different words that are created or used to create an emotional response. And it's through an emotional response that people engage. See how that works, right? Emotional response creates engagement. This is a great resource to have. And it literally is a resource. It's not a book you read from cover to cover. It's all broken down in different categories, different words, different phrases. And if you enjoy this, I think you'd find it helpful. The other thing to consider is scarcity generates action. The risk in marketing is that even if your message is great and it's to the right people, everybody is so darn busy today. They're so distracted. It's hard to get them to take action because they might say, well, someday I'm going to participate in your program, but I'm just too busy right now. So if you use a little bit of scarcity, sometimes that will actually drive action. It drives people to go, oh goodness, I don't want to miss out on this. So for example, you could say there's 3 days left to register for this upcoming program, or we've got 2 seats left. I can't tell you how many times I've been running a virtual webinar. And, you know, kind of like what I'm thinking even about this one, Carrie, where if we weren't getting, let's say we had 10 people sign up, I think we had 81. Let's say we had 10 and Carrie's like, oh goodness, people might be sitting and registering late because that's what happens, right? People wait and wait and wait. So I would have said to Carrie, well, why don't you send out a message and say, we've only got 10 more available seats, right? Now you might say, Shawn, that's lying. No, it isn't, because I can change Zoom such that I can only limit 20 people. So not a lie, it's influence. And scarcity drives people to take action. So I know they have the intention of joining us here, but they're busy, they forget about it. Can I use scarcity to get them to stop and actually take action? So there's something else. Again, these are more some advanced tactics, but for those of you really into this, like Tracy, I know really loves marketing. These are some things to consider. So just to wrap up then, I wanted to share this with you. So when I first, you know, the history of my business, and I quit my corporate job in 2009 officially. And launched my business in 2010. And at the time, my wife was off pregnant with her first child. She had actually been told she had to go off work. It was considered a high-risk pregnancy. Everything did work out. So I still remember sitting on the deck with her, and she said, okay, so you've quit. You want to start your own business. I'm not working. What now? And I said, well, I hopefully I'll figure this out. And so there's been some difficult times, like everybody, you know, separate from life, running a business can be challenging because you're marketing. You know, I know I can help people, but they don't know that. And it's through marketing, creating awareness and generating engagement that I create interest in what I do. And ultimately, right, then I gain opportunities to work with people. Carrie heard about me from somebody we mutually know, like a referral in a way. So I shared one day I was having kind of a bad stint. I was doing a lot of marketing. It wasn't really getting me anywhere. I wasn't getting the engagement I was looking for. I'm asking people for feedback. So I talked to a friend of mine and I was telling him about this. And he said, well, you know, he had a rough spot at one point. So he went and talked to his father. You know, you typically see your parents and they say something like, how's your day? How's your week? How are things? You know, and he said, he told his father, he said, oh, I'm not really having, you know, things aren't good, right? I'm marketing like crazy, trying to generate some opportunities, and it's not happening. And his father said to him, well, let me ask you a couple of questions. He said, okay. He says, is anybody shooting at you right now? He said, well, no. He said, okay, nobody's forcing you to jump out of a plane at low altitude with a parachute that might not open? Said, no. He's okay, well, that's what we had to do in World War II. So it sounds to me like you're having a pretty darn good day. So I share that with you because I've never forgotten that. Sometimes marketing, which takes your time, attention, and energy to create, doesn't have immediate results. And that can become frustrating. If you're doing a lot of work, you're writing a lot of blogs, creating a lot of posts, doing presentations, and you're not getting the engagement, the interest that you're looking for, it becomes frustrating. You can want to give up. But I want to suggest to you that marketing takes time. And just like anything else, the longer you do this, the better engagement you'll create, because marketing is like building something, right? It just layers and adds, and it creates this body of work, this platform, ultimately, that people start to hear about you, hear about the services and programs you offer, and they become interested. So if you are frustrated that you've tried something and it's not working, think back to my friend's story, right? Even though you may be having a bad day, it's maybe not as bad a day as it could be, especially for those that have gone before us and served. So I share that with you because, you know, ultimately when it comes to marketing and the idea that if you're a little bit concerned, a little bit scared, maybe a little bit fearful of marketing, remember, fear is false evidence appearing real. Fear often is something that we make up in our mind. And it's not true, it's not real. And the way to surpass it is to take action, to move forward. So I would encourage you, in fact, I would go so far as to even challenge you to take some ideas that you have today and actually implement them. So you've gained hopefully some new ideas or techniques that you've had through these conversations. I'd encourage you to take at least one and implement it. So I want to ask you to take a minute and think about one thing that you're going to implement, one thing. Then I'm going to ask for volunteers to tell us what's one thing you took away from today that you want to try and introduce or implement. Maybe it's a change to something you're currently doing. Maybe it's something new that you want to try. Okay, so volunteers. Amanda.
I really like the idea of like a learner focus group so we can understand their lived experience.
Yeah, great. Thanks, Amanda. Chloe.
I think I'm going to try maybe being able to break things down more by doing one thing, like you were saying, how you do your vlog or blog, and then break it down and use that and see if I can try that a little bit more.
Me question. Ask me anything you want. Yeah. I don't know if I'll answer you.
There's Diana had her hand up as well.
Did she? Okay, Diana.
Oh, sorry, I liked when you talk about testimonials that don't expect them right away from your students or your clients. And I think instead of that, we're going to be providing with examples for them to choose on once they, for example, write in an exit survey, right? Creating different exit surveys with examples of testimonials they can choose from, or an option for them to write their own words.
Perfect. Yeah, you could say something like, many of our students have said something like the following, and you use a couple examples. Say, if you'd like to leave yours, here's a box, or choose one of the ones above. So great example. That's a great idea. Thanks very much for that, Diana. Janet.
Just the reminder that it takes time and not to give up, because it does feel like, sometimes does feel like you do the same thing over and over. And on the one hand, like we heard, if you do the same thing and it doesn't work, cut it out, right? That may be in programming, but in the ads, you really never know who you're reaching. It does take time.
Yeah, you want to, if you want to go on an adventure of doing a ton of work and never really knowing if it works out, write a book. In fact, write 5. There is a 6-month journey of writing 60,000 words, which is broken out week by week, several hours every week. It's all going to make sense in the end. And you never really know if anybody reads it. I'm giving books away like crazy. People buying them. I don't know if anybody's reading it.
That's on my horizon too. So,
well, and it is. I'll tell you why I do it. People say, well, why do you write a book then? Because you don't make money from it. I'll tell you that right now. If you maybe do an Amazon book, maybe, but I really haven't made any money from it because it's the best business card I, in my profession, can hand out. It is marketing. A book is marketing. End of story. People say, so in that book, what did you mean by this? I'm like, I have no idea, because I'm on to book 5. That was like 2 years ago, but it's a marketing tool. That's what I use it for. Tracy.
So the testimonials is something that we have been doing. but you know, I guess the idea that I got was actually doing a script. And but I think how I want to do it is I would like to sit down with them and just have a conversation, and then have my instructors put into words with the learner, this is what I'm hearing from you. Does this sound right? And I feel like that will get it a little bit more tightened and polished, and it will take the pressure off of the learner to try to create something, because they may be passionate but intimidated about what they're going to say. And those Google reviews that the learners leave for us, not only do they help us in search, but I feel if it's anyone who wants to know about what we deliver or the services or what you can expect by coming through our doors, nothing more credible than another learner that is saying that they've had success with us.
Yeah, that's great. Thanks, Tracy. Camilla.
So for me, it is like one marketing form can turn into other marketing forms. Because sometimes we have videos and we keep thinking on how to create more content, but we have the content already there.
There you go. Great. Nancy.
A lot of these people have picked ones that I'm going to do, including like an advisory group and that kind of thing. But I love the 4 imprint idea. The beach balls really grabbed my attention, and I want to see if we can grab that grant and do something really cool with it, something fun.
Cool. Awesome. Well, the last one I'll read, and I'm going to turn it over to Carrie. Shannon said, great session, feeling some energy building for marketing. So that's good. That was the whole intention. No, take the fear, take the mystery out of it, make it straightforward. I know we dove down some rabbit holes for those of you that were interested in doing so, but hopefully for the rest of you, we just kept it straightforward. You've got some great ideas, and I want to thank you very much for your time and attention. I'm going to turn it back over to Carrie.
Great, thank you. I'm just gonna, in the chat, I'm just gonna post a link to a feedback form. If you can fill it out, that would be fantastic. I want to say a number of things, Sean. I've got a huge list, and I'm just going to comment about a couple of things that have just really hit me. One is we can't do it alone. So whether that's an advisory group or, working with our partners for feedback or working with each other, I mean, we don't. And so who was it? Somebody said, we have the content already. Like, that's just, how do we get it out? So I think that was great at capitalizing what we already have, but also things like we're members of the Chamber of Commerce. Like, let's see, and other groups. And something that you said right in the beginning when you bravely shared your first blog post is, often in my mind, I've heard this recently and I keep saying it over and over, is perfection is the enemy of done. And often we work and we work and we work to get it perfect before we ever launch it, because we're afraid of making a mistake or saying the wrong thing, or it could be better, or somebody might judge us. Let's just do it. Let's just get it out there and then move on right? And try something else as well. So I think that really resonates with me. And I've got all kinds of ideas, sort of how we can work together. So thank you very much, Sean. It was great. It was a great spark, and I really super appreciate your time this morning. As I can see in the chat, I was not alone. So now we have to figure out next steps, folks. How do we keep the momentum? Because, and I think your idea, Sean, of setting one thing and doing it, and I asked that in the evaluation too. The form that I just posted is what is the one thing you're going to move forward. So thank you, Sean. I don't know if anybody has any. I know there's comments posted, but feel free to. Diana, I think it's hard to see the hand. Actually, there's certain backgrounds that it's hard to see. But
just a quick question before we go, Sean. Would you be kind to share with us your contact, Eric C. Johnson, who helped you with your LinkedIn account?
Yes.
Please.
Yeah. So what I'll do is I will send the slides and Alex's info to Carrie, and Carrie, you can share that with everybody.
Very good. I will send out the slides. I'll take grab the notes from the chat and also a few notes from, that other people have mentioned that weren't in the chat. I'll pull that together. And so slides, and I will do the video as well to share, so that you can refresh when you're feeling like, oh, what do I do next? Listen to Shawn. All right. So any other comments before we wrap up? No. All right. Well, thank you so much, Shawn. We're greatly appreciated.
Thanks,
And
everybody.
We'll
Nice
be
to meet
checking
you.
out your new blog posts.
Sounds good. Thanks very much.
Thanks, everyone.
Thanks
Take
for
care.
putting this together, Carrie.